The story is about how 10 suitors, all handsome, fall for one woman who captures all of their hearts. This unconventional tragic novel is set in a fictional world, and the name of this book is Why Did the Duke's Daughter Roll Across the Pumpkin Patch? Our main lead, Daisy, was reincarnated into this world as a lowly commoner. However, her shock was only temporary, as she knows everything that happens in the story, and she felt like she had won the lottery. She thought she could use all her knowledge to buy a house and land and earn money. She was really excited and was planning to live happily ever after she purchased everything. But it was a foolish dream as she didn't have a single penny. She realized that she had to own something to make it grow, and was unhappy with the logic that was applied outside this fictional world. Daisy was doing the daily chores of her house when she noticed some people arriving with a small boy named Polyp. The boy was crying, and when Daisy asked him what was going on, a man stood between them and looked at Daisy. He asked her name, and Polyp suddenly started crying. These men asked Daisy to come with them because Duke Henstone was waiting for her. Daisy was shocked and asked if seriously the Duke was waiting for her. These men then grabbed Daisy and started taking her away. She turned around and asked Polyp to at least tell her what was going on. But Polyp, still crying, said that she should not worry as the Duke was the most noble man in the city. He also told her if she met the Duke, to make sure she set the record straight, as he could never commit a crime. Daisy was trying to understand the situation, but these men took her away, and Daisy was shouting, asking why she was being taken away for something Polyp did. She was thrown inside the chariot and taken away. She sat in the chair, thinking about the appearance of Duke Henstone. She wondered if the Duke's hair was like Pontypool's radiant sun, and his eyes were deep and dark like an endless ocean. His flawless pale skin glowed like New Year's beautiful snow, and his cold and determined character perfectly matched his features. Daisy was thinking all of this because he was portrayed this way. She knew he didn't appear in the story directly, but he was known as the most powerful figure, and Daisy thought that someone like him would never associate himself with commoners like her or Polyp. But there was another reason why she was nervous. Duke Henstone was the father of the female protagonist in the story. They reached the palace, and the man informed the Duke that he had brought Daisy. Daisy took in the sight of the palace. She got on her knees. The Duke asked her to have a seat, but she replied that she would stay standing. The Duke suddenly got to his point and asked her a question. He first told Daisy her age and informed her that she was an orphan with no family and her hometown was unknown. He was reading all of this from a piece of paper. He also told her about the place where she worked, but mentioned that she was fired from that place. When she asked him why she was fired, as that was her only source of income, the Duke threw a necklace and said, "Use this for the month's rent," and asked her if it looked familiar. The Duke informed her that her foolish friend sold it at a jewelry store. She was shocked. The Duke responded that the store owner reported it as stolen, and the Duke stated that he wouldn't tolerate thieves running around freely in his establishment. He also informed her that it turns out Daisy was the one who gave her friend the necklace. He came close to Daisy and asked her where she got this necklace. Daisy was taken away by the Duke's men. Polyp was crying. He was whiny and clingy, mainly harmless but could develop into something worse. Nobody was ready to welcome him, yet he was the first friend Daisy made in this world. Reflecting back to when Polyp came to meet Daisy, he was crying even then. He came running toward her, but she kicked him and told him not to come near. She asked him to tell her what happened from a distance. Polyp informed her that he had to move house with his mother but had no money. No matter how much he tried to scrape and save, it was never enough. He didn't know what to do. His house was now worth less than what he paid for, so he might not get any money back if he sold it. His mother was sick, and he couldn't move because he didn't have the money. Daisy gave it some thought and asked him why he was telling her everything, as she didn't have any money either. Polyp was disappointed and said that if she couldn't help, she could at least say a few kind words to relieve the situation. He mentioned that he was already going through a lot and that it was his mother who was really having a hard time. After a while, Daisy gave him something and told him to stop crying. Polyp asked her what it was. When he opened the box, he found a necklace. He was about to hug Daisy, but she again asked him to stay away. She informed him that she was only going to help him out this once. She said that if anyone suspected them of having this necklace, they might think it was stolen. She warned him not to sell it at a jewelry store. Polyp promised to do whatever Daisy said. Back in the present, he did the exact opposite of what she told him to do. Daisy was on her knees while the Duke informed her about the situation. The Duke mentioned that Polyp said he needed emergency funds to purchase a carriage for his girlfriend. Daisy was disappointed with Polyp. The Duke informed her that these minor details were of no importance to him. He asked her where she got the necklace. Daisy explained that she got it from an auction, saying she had gathered everything she owned to buy it and that it was not illegal. At the auction, goods or properties are sold to the highest bidder. Various auctions were held several times a day, and even ordinary people like Daisy could attend for fun with a small sum of money. Usually, she could only buy small, cheap items, but sometimes she came across wonderful things at a low price. The Duke found it strange, as the previous owner of the necklace had passed away recently. Only a few acquaintances would have known about the auction for the disposal of the deceased's property, which probably took place on short notice. He wondered how a commoner with no connections could stumble upon that auction and coincidentally have her entire savings to buy the necklace. Daisy, with a weak voice, said that she knew everything about this world. The Duke was losing his patience and demanded that she explain everything, or he would throw her in jail. Daisy thought it was better to tell him the truth. She started explaining that Chapter 1 is called All You Need to Know About the World of the Tragic Novel. She also informed him that there were a lot of descriptions about Pietra Henstone, the protagonist of the story. The Duke was shocked. Daisy thought she should have started with a brief synopsis. She decided to tell him everything, including his own secrets and things he himself had forgotten. Daisy revealed that she was reincarnated in this world. The Duke said that this is a world in a book. Daisy informed him that if he was curious about anything, he could ask her. The Duke asked what the title of the book was. She responded that it was Why Did the Duke's Daughter Roll Across the Pumpkin Patch? The Duke wondered why someone would give such a name to a book. Daisy thought to herself that she wanted to keep the title unique. She later informed him that she was the author of Why Did the Duke's Daughter Roll Across the Pumpkin Patch, and that she was the one who chose the title. Daisy started explaining to the Duke everything that had happened to her and the book she was now inside. She also informed him that the book contained the fantasies of 10 friends and was created and written for fun. It is the story of 10 suitors and their unrelenting desires for the female who has captured their hearts. The story was filled with all their hopes and desires. How could she have known that she would be reincarnated into the world she created? She was thinking about how she died, how she lost consciousness from all the smoke, and when she opened her eyes, she was in the novel she wrote with her friends. She wiped her tears and said that was the story of her life. The Duke was a bit shocked and said, "So you are saying that my daughter is the protagonist?" She replied, "Yes." He responded, "My daughter is the female lead." "Well, I am not surprised, but what's a tragic novel?" He was curious to know what happens to Pietra in the tragic novel. Daisy wondered how to explain it to him. How was she supposed to tell him about the story of his daughter's greed and pleasure? Looking at the Duke's face, he seemed very excited, and Daisy thought if she told him the truth, she would be dead for sure. She explained that a tragic novel alludes to devastation and misfortune, and she was not sure how to tell him about this. The Duke responded that he thought it wasn't a happy story. She apologized. He then asked who the male lead was. Daisy had a smile on her face and was excited to tell him about the male characters. The Duke was angry with the male characters. She informed him, "Yes, there are a total of 10. The Duke stood up from his chair and said, "How dare they? It's not enough that they approach my daughter, but they even make her the victim of a tragedy. I can't let that happen. I better nip these 10 suitors in the bud." Daisy was shocked as she knew now the Duke wouldn't let those devils corrupt his daughter. The Duke sounded very serious. Daisy informed him that he still had a long time before that happened. Daisy gave the Duke an idea. Why doesn't he use her to protect his daughter? She informed him that as she was the original author, she could figure things out and change the future. The Duke turned around and smirked, saying, "You will protect Pietra." She said, "Of course," and promised that she could prevent everything that happens in the original story. She also vowed, "I won't let your daughter meet any of them. I will use everything I know to change her fate." The Duke responded, "And if you fail then?" Daisy replied, "Then you can take my life." The Duke responded, "Your life is not more important to me." Suddenly, a maid came and informed him that it was past the promised time. The Duke wondered how he could forget about the time he had to spend with his daughter over something like this. He moved towards the door and told Daisy that if she could protect his daughter, then he would give her a chance to meet Pietra. He informed Daisy that he was only going to give her one chance. The Duke pulled her along to meet Pietra. As they were about to open the door, the Duke informed Daisy that he would introduce her as the new nanny candidate. He also said that this didn't mean he was going to hire her. He informed her that he spoke very politely to everyone in front of his daughter and asked her to get used to it. They went inside, and the Duke opened his arms to greet his daughter Pietra. A small baby came running, calling the Duke daddy, and hugged him. The Duke asked his daughter to meet the new nanny. Daisy wondered if this short, little girl was really Pietra, the female protagonist of the tragic novel. The Duke met his daughter, and Daisy looked at Pietra. For now, she was a small girl. Her hair looked like a chestnut burr or a grassy head doll. Daisy wanted to touch it too, but if she did, she would definitely be punished. She introduced herself to the baby, who had her face buried in her father's chest. Daisy found it very adorable. The Duke asked, "What should we do, Nanny?" as if he was trying to tell her, "Do you really think you'll be able to win my daughter over?" Daisy came close to the little girl, said, "Nice to meet you, my lady," and asked if she could join her tea party. Daisy was thinking about something the Duke didn't know, and she took 2 chocolates from her pocket and showed them to the baby. She remembered that she was the one who put in the most work developing Pietra's character, including her likes, dislikes, colors, and fondness for frogs. She knew everything. Pietra suddenly started liking Daisy, and when asked if she would like to have a tea party with the new nanny candidate, she said yes. They both invited the Duke to join them. The 3 of them were sitting at a table having a tea party. Daisy kept more chocolate cookies and other treats on the table, and Pietra asked if she could eat all of them. She was eating all the chocolates, and Daisy found it very cute. She really wanted to touch the little baby's hair. As they were eating jelly, Daisy talked about the flavors and informed Pietra that if she ate all 3 candles together, she would taste tropical fruits. Pietra was really happy and told her father about the fun she was having. The Duke asked Pietra to thank Daisy for all the delicious treats. He wanted to wrap it up, but Daisy had a different plan. She took a pumpkin candy from her pocket and gave it to Pietra, saying she could eat it tomorrow. Daisy was thinking about Pietra's favorite place in the book, a place that soothed her whenever she was struggling, an endless pumpkin patch. Pietra took the candy, came running towards Daisy, and hugged her. The little baby asked, "Do you like pumpkins as well?" Daisy responded, "Of course, I can't eat properly unless there is a pumpkin dish." Daisy really wanted to touch her hair, but as she raised her arms, Pietra ran away. The Duke picked up his daughter and said he was going to find a nanny she would love. Pietra told him that she liked Daisy. The Duke was confused, and Pietra told him again that she liked Nanny Daisy. After saying this, she ran away. The Duke was angry, and Daisy was blushing. Daisy was happy because she knew that the Duke would do anything his daughter said. So, if Pietra said she liked Nanny Daisy, the Duke had to keep her. The Duke told Daisy that considering what had happened, they should rediscuss some things. Daisy thought he was going to hire her as his daughter's nanny, but he informed her that she would be a fake nanny. They would pretend she was her nanny, but her actual job would be to stop his daughter from meeting male suitors. Daisy thought that with this offer on the table, she should negotiate the salary and everything else. She asked him about the wages, and he turned around, went to his table, and started signing a contract. He said that since they were doing this, why didn't he draft a contract outlining the terms? The first line stated that she would live in the palace, as suitors could come sniffing around while Daisy was absent. Secondly, the Duke offered to give her 10 times her usual wages for each suitor she stopped, and he would pay her weekly. The pay was way more than she used to make annually. She signed the contract and was happy with it. After she signed, the Duke gave her an empty book and told her to write down everything she knew about the suitors. Daisy thought that even though Pirta wouldn't meet the main character until much later in the future, the Duke was already starting to worry. She tried to remember the male leads that she and her friend had created. She knew that the Lord of the Magic Tower and Knight Commander Laerfil's son were also there. He was worried about how the Imperial family could be involved. The real male lead was likely one of these 2, but there were only 5 names mentioned. When he asked Daisy, she informed him that she couldn't remember the other 5 names as they were quite complicated. She said that she would be able to recognize them if she saw them in person. The Duke was not joking around and said that he would host an event tomorrow and invite all the noble families. Daisy asked if there was an event tomorrow. The Duke said that he'd be sending out the invitations right away. When Daisy looked at the time, it was 10 p.m. She thought it was already so late. The next morning, excluding families where the head was absent and couldn't respond, a total of 65 replies were received. The total number of guests, including their companions, was 150. Daisy thought that Duke Henstone was really powerful. A maid came and informed Daisy that her attire was ready. Daisy thought that as she was the fake nanny for the greatest duke in the empire, she should be wearing something cool and going to a fantasy ball. But in reality, she was working as a maid and had a lot of work to do. The Duke informed her that nanas generally don't attend such events, so there was no reason for her to. But as Daisy was being a maid for this party, she would be able to go about the ballroom without arousing suspicion. The Duke also reminded her that she was not the actual nanny. Daisy was not happy with this, and as she was handling many plates and walking around the palace, an old lady called her and asked her to fetch her shawl from the first floor. Suddenly, many people came to Daisy and started ordering champagne or asked her to open the window as someone was feeling warm. She was bombarded with orders, and the Duke was just sitting in a corner, ignoring her. Daisy thought all of this happened because of him. But suddenly she heard someone say that the baby had stopped kicking. Now they should go and greet the Duke. When she turned around, she noticed that the face was recognizable. Daisy and her friends were discussing what color the eyes of a character should be. Her friend replied that if he is a really famous scholar, then he must have red eyes. She was determined that her character must have red eyes. Daisy found one suitor, an absolute genius who only comes along once every few centuries. After the young scholar meets Pirda, he gives up all of his academic success and achievements. However, he hasn't even been born yet. The person Daisy saw was the parent of the suitor. Another tall and muscular man bumped into the lady who was pregnant, and the man said, "Why is there a pregnant woman at this party?" The tall man was Marquis Loebner, whose rank is just below the Duke. He asked his daughter to walk faster because they were late. His daughter asked him, "I hate children, and how could you ask me to be their mother?" The Marquis replied to his daughter, "Who is asking you to be their mother? You can leave the children to the nanny or governess. They grow up on their own." Hidden, Daisy learned that the Duke has been a bachelor for several years and is probably thinking about rearing children. Marquis also informed his daughter that a woman should be concerned about marrying into a good family, and he wanted her to win the Duke's heart. Daisy now gave it a thought and realized who Pirda's mother was. She thought it would be rude to ask the Duke directly. The lady, or the mother of the suitor, was trembling with a bit of pain. Daisy approached her and asked if she needed any help and if she was all right. In her mind, Daisy was thinking that the most important part is that she has finally found the mother of the suitor. Daniel came to them, called them by their names, and asked if they were all right. He also informed them that the Duke had asked him to keep an eye on them since she was with child. He wanted to make sure they were taken care of. The parents of the suitor were really happy and grateful and thought they should go and greet the Duke. By the looks of the father of the suitor, he was handsome, and Daisy thought that if her friend saw his face, she would faint. The couple went to meet the Duke. Daisy was thinking that she should go and report this to the Duke, but someone called her from behind, and she turned around. The man was dead drunk. He asked Daisy if she was new here, and while saying this, he raised his hand and patted her back inappropriately. He asked her if she was happy here. Otherwise, he was ready to make her happy financially, and he asked Daisy to make him happy. Suddenly, she banged his head with a plate. The man got angry, stood up, and started shouting. Suddenly, the Duke came there and asked what the situation was. The man who got hit on his head started saying to the Duke that he was glad he was there and showed him that Daisy hit him on his head. He started shouting that lowlifes like her always show their true nature and asked the Duke to fire her. The Duke listened to this and handed over a heavy plate to Daisy, saying that if she really wanted to make a scene, she should have used this. Daisy was confused, thinking if he really wanted her to smash his head with this heavy thing. The man was angry and said, "What are you doing, sir?" The Duke came near the man and said, "You should watch your mouth, Baron." He also informed him that he would not stand by and watch someone act so rudely towards one of his own people. Daisy was shocked by this and wondered what he meant by "my people." The Duke asked the guards to escort the Baron to his home and said he hoped they wouldn't run into each other again. The man was taken away by the Duke's men. The Marquis came to the Duke and mentioned that he hadn't heard from him in a while. He was pleasantly surprised when the Duke invited him to the party. The Marquis informed the Duke that his daughter had turned 21 and wanted to meet him. Belle introduced herself and expressed her desire to meet the Duke. She wondered how someone could be so beautiful and thought that no one would mind if he had 10 kids. Women would still want him. She boldly asked if she could call him Dane. Her father commented that his daughter was fearless. Belle, confident and accustomed to numerous marriage proposals, found them meaningless now as she had fallen in love at first sight. As she was speaking, the Duke stood up and excused himself, heading to the scene where Daisy had hit a man. After instructing his people to take the man home, Daisy approached the Duke, saying she had something important to tell him. He whispered that he saw her talking with Countess Lapel, and that she wanted to meet in the study room after the party. People overheard this and started murmuring, wondering why they wanted to meet in the study room afterward. Rumors spread throughout the palace, but they didn't care much. However, Daisy didn't want this kind of attention. She left the party, thinking about how massive the palace was and that there was no one to clean it. She also wondered where Pirda was. After getting permission, Daisy went to her room and found her lying on her bed, facing the bed. Daisy found her very adorable. She approached and asked, "Are you upset, my lady?" Pirda replied that she was upset because she couldn't go out. She wanted to play on the second-floor terrace, but her father had told her she couldn't. Daisy asked if she would like to go there now. Pirda asked where, and after a while, Daisy took her to the second-floor terrace. Pirda was happy, feeling like she was having a party in the mirror room above her. The ceiling was made of mirrors. She said she loved it and always wanted to have a party there. She mentioned that it was beautiful at night. Daisy asked how she liked her milk, and Pirda replied, "A little warm." While pouring the milk, Daisy asked, "Did your father not allow you to come out?" She suggested that Pirda should be more persistent next time, sure that the Duke would listen. Pirda replied that her uncle didn't stop her, she just didn't want people trying to touch her hair. Daisy remarked that her hair reminded people of a cute chestnut. But she suddenly stopped and stood up because Pirda had just called the Duke her uncle. Daisy was shocked, wondering how there could be something the author didn't know about. Daisy made Pirda wear a pair of pumpkin-designed pajamas since she liked pumpkins. Pirda mentioned, "I think you understand me a little," then yawned and fell asleep in her bed. Daisy found it very adorable and, being tired from the long day, felt exhausted herself. She had worked much more than she had anticipated and was still in shock, unable to believe that the Duke was her uncle. She remembered the time when she asked Pirda if Duke Henstone was her uncle. Pirda replied yes, and Daisy asked why she called her uncle father. Pirda responded that if she didn't, her uncle would be sad. Daisy pondered who would have thought there were secrets about Pirda's birth that even the writer didn't know. Daisy yawned and murmured that she needed to go and see the Duke, but she fell asleep right there. The Duke came into the room, saw Daisy asleep, and placed a blanket over her. The next morning, Daisy informed the Duke that Countess Lapel's baby would be one of the suitors. The Duke wondered how that could be since the baby wasn't even born yet. Daisy explained that the eldest son of the Lapel family turned out to be a young genius. He would graduate early, become a professor at the age of 20, and return to his alma mater. The Duke, uninterested in his life story, asked how he met Pirda. Daisy replied that he became her private tutor. Although he was younger than her, he was a genius who became a professor at 20. The Duke questioned why the eldest son of the Lapel family needed to work as a private tutor. Daisy mentioned it was to pay for his studies abroad, as the family's financial situation wouldn't improve much in the future. The Duke speculated that Lapel's son would want to study abroad in the future, and Daisy advised him not hiring Lapel's son as Pirda's personal tutor to prevent them from meeting. The Duke insisted he would make that decision himself. Daisy tried to give a better explanation, but the Duke asserted he would make the final decision and began to leave. Suddenly, Daisy remembered learning that the Duke was not Pirda's father and asked him about it. The Duke, shocked, asked how she knew. Daisy replied that Pirda had informed her, adding that he had given Pirda many pieces of paper to read. The Duke approached Daisy and warned that if this information got out, it could be problematic. Daisy promised to keep his secret, emphasizing that whether or not he was Pirda's biological father, the important thing was that he cared for her and loved her the most. The Duke then removed a book from the shelf, revealing a hidden room full of clothes he had bought for Pirda. However, he mentioned that she never allowed anyone to dress her, not even him. Daisy suggested that since Pirda loved to run around, long dresses wouldn't be comfortable. They discussed Pirda's preferences, but Daisy thought the Duke didn't need to tell her much as she already knew how Pirda would succeed later on. The Duke asked Daisy to find out Pirda's favorite color. Finally, Daisy asked the Duke what they should do about the eldest son of Lapel. When Daisy was resting in her room, she felt tired, and her neck was sore from nodding in agreement with the Duke while he showcased his daughter's achievements. Daisy thought that Pirda would be studying for a while, so she decided to take a nap. After a while, she heard some noise from outside and woke up, wondering why it was so noisy. Since the party was over, nothing else should have been planned for the day. She went outside and found a maid standing there. Upon asking, the maid replied that there was a grand formal dinner tonight. They were still clearing up from the previous night, so they were in an emergency situation. The maid also mentioned that the Duke had guests coming tonight, including the Count and his wife. Daisy confirmed if they were the Lapels, and the maid said yes. Daisy thanked the maid and quickly left. She wondered why the Duke had invited them all of a sudden and realized that he would do whatever it took to protect his daughter from suitors. While running towards her room, Daisy thought about what the Duke was plotting and, more importantly, why he hadn't told her about it. She asked about the Duke's whereabouts but learned he had just left. Daisy returned to her room, realizing she had no other choice but to act as a maid to see for herself. She took a tray of food from the kitchen and told the maids she would be helping them. Daisy was amazed by the sight of the food. As she walked towards their room, she wondered what the Duke was up to. She reached the room where the Duke and the Lapels were having dinner. Lapel was having a conversation with the Duke, saying he couldn't understand why the Duke was making such an offer. Daisy overheard this and wanted to know what the offer was. The Duke explained that the reason behind his offer was simple. He had read the research report that Lapel had registered at the Foreign Academy, which was brilliant, the work of a long-time academic. The Duke mentioned he couldn't just stand by and watch such talent go to waste. The Duke then asked Lapel if his offer was not too burdensome, and requested him to consider it. Lapel responded that, to be honest, he had always wanted to be a scholar, but as the head of a household, he was no longer young and had a child on the way. The Duke replied that he understood and would also prioritize his family. Lapel thanked the Duke, saying he never imagined receiving a letter of recommendation for the Tistan Empire Academy. The Duke told him he had high expectations of him, and now that he had accepted, things would move quickly. The Duke also decided to provide relocation costs and housing support so Lapel could start his research as soon as possible. Daisy realized that the Duke was sending them off to a faraway place under this pretext. The Duke also mentioned that the academy was at a considerable distance, but he would do his best to ensure the lady did not experience any discomfort. He would provide the highest class cabin and a professional physician to accompany them on the ship. The Lapels expressed their gratitude all night and left in the carriage ordered by the Duke. Daisy then asked the Duke why he was sending the Lapels abroad. The Duke informed her that he sent them because the Tistan Academy was highly esteemed. The Duke told Daisy that their son would want to study abroad, so he sent them away in advance. This was the Duke's plan to save his daughter from the first suitor they might meet, even though he was not yet born. The Duke did not want to take any chances. Daisy asked the Duke, "Did you move everything from my house?" The Duke replied that she should have already done that. Daisy was thinking that once she was removed from this place, she would go back to her job, and her house was near the restaurant where she worked. The Duke said, "As you mentioned, you are not in a position to pay rent for a place you weren't even staying, so I asked my people to bring your stuff from there." Daisy asked, "What if you kick me out?" The Duke replied, "Why would I do that?" He also mentioned that he wouldn't have called her one of his people if he was going to kick her out easily. The Duke added that now they shared a huge secret, so he wasn't going to let her go easily. After listening to his words, Daisy blushed. She thought that referring to his hired staff as his people was a bad habit of the Duke. Later, Daisy met Hattie, a character who didn't appear in the original book. He informed Daisy that the butler received her things and would bring them right away. Daisy looked at Hattie and thought that he didn't seem like a bad person. She also thought that she might have written this book, but there were so many things she didn't know, and she should be careful. Suddenly, the butler came inside. He was old and looked very frustrated. He threw Daisy's bag on the ground and murmured to himself. Daisy wondered why this man was so angry and thought he could have just told her that her things had arrived. Suddenly, Pirta came out, calling Daisy, and met the old man. The old man started lecturing Pirta, telling her that she should not run in such an unladylike manner. He mentioned that he was disappointed because a noble lady should not roam around like that. He lectured Pirta as if she were an old woman and criticized the trousers she was wearing. Daisy listened to all of this and wondered what the problem was with this old man, as Pirta was still a young child and nobody should be talking to her like that. The butler kept saying that if she continued like this, she might never get married and could still be single in her 30 seconds. This made Daisy very angry. She thought, what the hell is this old man talking about? She wondered how, even though he was a butler, he could be allowed to talk to Pirta in this way. Daisy couldn't control herself any longer and asked the old man what he was talking about. The old man was angry at Daisy and said, "Don't you have any manners on how to speak, even though you are new here?" Daisy replied, "How can I possibly just stand here while you spew nonsense like that?" The old man then turned towards Pirta again and said, "If you don't behave, you will turn into this ignorant woman," which made Daisy even angrier, and she started shouting at the old man for talking nonsense to a small child. The butler assumed, based on Daisy's appearance, that she was a maid. Daisy informed him that she was the nanny, and Pirta confirmed the same. The old butler was shocked to hear that Daisy was the new nanny. He didn't believe her and started questioning her, saying that if she was lying, she'd be fired from the mansion and would never work anywhere else again. Daisy responded that if he didn't believe her, he could ask the Duke himself. She continued, saying that if she got fired, she would make sure the old man got what he deserved. She then told the old butler to listen carefully. First, he should never say anything like that to Lady Pirta again. Second, if he ever disrespected a woman again, she would break both of his legs. And lastly, she asked the butler to get out of her room. The old man shook his head and left the room. Pirta was worried about Daisy, as she saw her angry for the first time. Pirta said it was her fault and apologized. Daisy tried to make her understand that she shouldn't be sorry and shouldn't be scared because her dad was the boss around there. Pirta continued, saying that everyone there said similar things to what the old butler said. They always commented about her clothes and her hair, and if she tried to tell her dad, she never saw those people again. Pirta was worried that if she told her father about this incident, she would not be able to see Daisy ever again. Daisy understood the situation and told Pirta that from now on, if something like this happened again, she should inform Daisy and not her father. Daisy also made sure to reassure her that nothing would happen to Daisy if she did so. They both made a promise to each other. Pirta was happy and allowed Daisy to touch her hair. To Pirta, Daisy was very awesome and kind. Daisy was glad that Pirda was feeling better. Pirda and Daisy developed a friendship. The Duke used to hand over Pirda to Daisy while he was busy with his own work. After a few days, Pirda held Daisy's hand and took her to a place she wanted to show her. It was outside the palace, and it was a tree, but it was discolored. Daisy and Pirda approached the tree. Daisy noticed it grew noticeably darker the closer they got. She observed that the roots seemed rotten. Pirda explained that her mother had planted the tree a long time ago, thinking it would look nice. Daisy understood why they kept it despite its condition. Pirda was cheerful around the tree, and Daisy grasped that Pirda wanted to show it to her because it held significance for her. Pirda offered Daisy a flower and started running around. They began playing hide and seek, but when Daisy went to find Pirda, she heard the girl scream. These were swarming and attacking her. Daisy scooped Pirda up and ran back to the palace as quickly as she could. The doctor arrived and informed the Duke that Pirda, fortunately, hadn't been stung by any poisonous bees and would be all right. He dismissed the doctor once his examination was complete. Filled with tears, Daisy apologized to the Duke, acknowledging she should have been more watchful while looking after Pirda. The Duke saw Daisy trembling. He asked her to remove her shawl. Though it wasn't even cold, she continued to tremble when she took it off. He noticed a wound on her shoulder. The Duke instructed Hattie to call the doctor back. Later, while Daisy rested in her room, the Duke visited. He told her not to get up and brought her medicine. He applied it to her shoulder himself. While doing so, the Duke apologized that Daisy got hurt because of his daughter. The doctor had informed the Duke that the injury could have been much worse and expressed surprise that Daisy hadn't fainted. He also mentioned the pain must have been excruciating and wasn't sure how she managed to return to the mansion in that state. The Duke tucked the blanket around Daisy and assured her he would keep the doctor on standby until she recovered. As he was leaving the room, the Duke instructed Hattie to call the gardeners. The next morning, Pirda went to the same place and noticed that her favorite tree, which her mom had planted, was no longer there. She started crying very loudly. Her dad tried to explain that he had no choice, and it was dangerous. She was badly hurt yesterday because of it. Pirda cried, insisting that it was not at all dangerous. The Duke told her that Nanny Daisy was in a lot of pain because of the bees, and she should check her shoulder. Pirda looked at Daisy with tears in her eyes, ran to her, and apologized for causing her pain. Daisy asked Pirda to stop crying or else she would wear herself out. The Duke then suggested it was time for breakfast, but Pirda turned to him and said, "Uncle, I hate you." The Duke was shocked, as Pirda used to call him father, but today she was so angry that she called him uncle. After a while, Daisy went to Pirda's room with some snacks to cheer her up. But the tree was very special to Pirda. Yesterday, when she told Daisy about the tree, Daisy understood that Pirda held onto it because she couldn't remember her mother. Perhaps it was the same for the Duke. He had tried his best to keep that tree alive, but after yesterday's incident, they had to cut it down. Daisy tried to cheer Pirda up, but Pirda hugged her and said, "You are all I have got now." The Duke was in a serious situation as his beloved Pirda now kept referring to him as her uncle. This continued for a while, and she remained angry with him. He tried to make amends, but nothing worked. The next day, Pirda avoided speaking to the Duke all day. After some time, Daisy placed Pirda on the Duke's lap. The Duke tried to explain that he was sorry for what he did and should have discussed it with her. He also made her understand that he couldn't let her or Nanny Daisy get hurt again and told her that she was more important to him than the tree. The Duke promised that they could go and buy a bigger and better tree afterward from the market and plant it in the same spot. But Pirda replied that no matter how pretty the new tree would be, it wouldn't be the same. She said he didn't understand anything and hugged Daisy again. Daisy thought that if only she hadn't messed up yesterday, they wouldn't be in this situation. Later that night, Daisy went to the Duke's room to check on him. She also had an idea. She informed the Duke that Pirda would have an easier time letting go if she could focus on something else. The Duke was confused. Daisy explained that she had a friend she wanted to introduce to Pirda. This friend lived nearby and was the same age as Pirda. She was a supporting female character in the book. Daisy informed the Duke that she wanted a friend to meet Pirda. This friend lived nearby, was the same age as Pirda, and was a supporting female character in the book. Confused, the Duke listened as Daisy explained that if Pirda spent time with this friend, she might be able to overcome her attachment to her mother more easily. She added that this character was the only person in the original story that Pirda wanted to get close to, but, unfortunately, they were unable to become friends. The Duke asked for the reason, and Daisy informed him that a suitor's obsession with Pirda drove a wedge between the two women. The Duke concluded that if they could bring the girls together now and give them space, there should be no problems, resolving the issue with the suitor as well, killing two birds with one stone. The Duke was worried about Pirta not having any friends, even when she grew older. He asked Daisy what would happen if they went along with her suggestion, and the girls didn't become friends, leaving his daughter even more heartbroken. Daisy reassured the Duke that she was confident they would get close because the girl was clever and bright, with a reserved and timid side that would be drawn to Pirta's more outgoing and lively personality. Daisy also mentioned that Pirta's birthday was coming up. When the Duke asked for the child's name, Daisy informed him she was the second daughter of Marquis Francois, Lady Rhodizon. The next morning, the Duke was planning to invite another girl Pirta's age. Hattie mentioned that he thought the Duke would never invite any outsider to his daughter's birthday before she became an adult, and assumed that the Duke was being overprotective. Hattie left, and Pirta came to the scene, asking Daisy where Hattie was going. Daisy thought she shouldn't tell her about the friend since it wasn't certain yet, so she just told Pirta that Hattie had some errands and would be back soon. Pirta said she didn't care if he came late, as she only needed Daisy. The Duke also wanted a hug and asked for one from his daughter. She stared at him and turned away, a straight rejection. Later, the Duke and Daisy discussed how Pirta was still angry with him. Daisy suggested that he walk with her in the pumpkin field at night and talk about the pumpkin palace to start mending their relationship. But the Duke was thinking that maybe it was a mistake to have her call him dad in the first place. Daisy was thinking that the more estranged they became, the more she had to do in between. Pirta wasn't even looking at the Duke, so all he could do was trail after his daughter, who was always following Daisy. Her job was to report everything that the little chestnut said back to the Duke, the things she wanted to do. The Duke wanted to know all of it. Daisy was wondering how long she would be able to keep it up. After some time, Daisy came to the Duke and whispered something she had learned while working as a babysitter. The next morning at the breakfast table, Pirta came and asked Daisy if she had slept well. There was a method Daisy had learned from another mother in her previous life to smooth things over between her daughter and husband. She told the child, "Look at mommy holding daddy. Do you want to hold daddy's hand too?" She mentioned that it didn't even take a day for her daughter to forgive her husband, so Daisy was now staring at the Duke's hand. Daisy told Pirta to say good morning to her father while holding his hand. The Duke was blushing, and so was Daisy. Pirta looked at them and said good morning without a smile. She then jumped from her chair and went somewhere, leaving Daisy wondering when she should let go of the Duke's hand. The next morning, Pirta was crying as Daisy was preparing to leave. Pirta insisted that Daisy not go anywhere, grabbing her bag. The Duke told his daughter that this was not proper behavior. The Duke and Daisy were trying to leave for the Francois house to invite their daughter to Pirta's birthday party, and had hoped to do so before Pirta woke up. But they were too late. Daisy promised Pirta that she would be back as soon as possible. Pirta understood, knowing Daisy never lied, and let them leave. They reached the Francois house, where the couple welcomed the Duke and Daisy. Marquis Francois apologized for missing the previous party due to a family obligation and hoped the Duke understood. They asked why the Duke visited so early and remarked on his female companion. The Duke explained that they were there to invite their child to his daughter's birthday party. Daisy handed over the invitation, and Francois was amazed. They had always sent birthday gifts for the Duke's daughter but had never received an invitation before. Francois accepted the invitation and asked if the Duke would like to meet their sons, Pat and Rentley. The sons introduced themselves, and the Francois parents spoke highly of them, but the Duke interrupted, stating he was there to see their daughter. The Duke also mentioned he wanted to invite their second daughter, Lady Rhodizon, to the party. He added that he would be grateful if the other children could attend, but as this was the first party with a friend invitation, they wanted to keep it small. He hoped they understood. The Francois had hoped to become in-laws by introducing their sons to the Duke, but those hopes were dashed when the Duke expressed interest in only their daughter attending. They called for Rhodizon. The Duke met their daughter and invited her to Pirta's birthday party, mentioning she was the only invited guest. Daisy assured Rhodizon that they would become friends quickly and promised there would be lots of delicious treats and activities. When they returned to the palace, Pirta was delighted to see Daisy and gave her a kiss for keeping her promise. The Duke felt left out, so Daisy asked Pirta to give her father a kiss as well. Pirta, however, asked Daisy to kiss him first. For the sake of reconciliation, Daisy decided she had no choice and kissed the Duke on the cheek. Both felt awkward, and their cheeks turned red. The next morning, while Daisy, the Duke, and Pirta were having breakfast, Pirta kept asking about the invited guest. She wanted to know who it was. The Duke informed her that Lady Rhodizon, the daughter of Marquis Francois, who was the same age as her, was coming to meet her. Daisy added that it would be wonderful for Pirta to have a friend. The Duke mentioned that this would be the first time Pirta would have a friend over for her birthday. Pirta was really happy but then started worrying about what they would do when they met for the first time. Daisy reassured Pirta that they would become friends quickly. She also mentioned that her dad went out of his way to invite Rhodazin because he wanted Pirta to have a great time. The Duke continued, saying it would be the best party ever and guaranteed it. He told his daughter that they would get new tables, chairs, and tableware for the event. They were also going to hire the most famous patissier to bake the cake. Pirta asked if she could watch them bake the cake, and the Duke agreed, adding that they would also get a pair of pumpkin pants tailored for the occasion in all the colors she wanted. He also mentioned that they would decorate the hall with hundreds of pumpkin dolls. Pirta said she would think about it, but deep down, everyone knew she was excited. Hattie came and called the Duke away. As he was leaving, Pirta grabbed his leg but then ran and hid behind Daisy. Pirta explained that she confused him with Daisy for a second. Pirta then hugged Daisy and asked her to pass it along to her dad. Daisy tried to make her understand that her dad would appreciate the hug more if she gave it herself. Pirta said it was still hard for her and insisted that Daisy hug her dad on her behalf. Daisy reached out to the Duke and conveyed Pirta's hug. The Duke then hugged Daisy and they both felt awkward. The Duke mentioned that Daisy could say no if she didn't want to, but Daisy said it wasn't that she didn't want to, it was just an awkward situation, and she left. That night, while making Pirta's bed, Daisy wondered how she always managed to do the wrong things at the wrong time. Pirta mentioned she had fun that day, but Daisy urged her to make up with her dad as he was really sad. Pirta decided to make up with her dad and asked Daisy to go with her to his room. When they entered, Pirta ran to her dad, hugged him, and apologized for making him sad. The Duke also apologized for cutting down the tree she loved. The Duke asked if he could tuck her in that night, but Pirta had a different plan. She said, since they had made up, they should all sleep together. The Duke and Daisy were shocked. The Duke and Daisy couldn't deny Pirta's request. They all ended up sharing the same bed. The Duke faced the wall beside him while Daisy slept with Pirta. They tried to avoid the situation by saying the bed would be too small for the three of them, but Pirta was determined and teary-eyed, so they couldn't refuse. After a while, Pirta asked her father why he was facing the wall and urged him to turn around. The Duke suggested they sleep, but Pirta became sad again. Daisy reassured the Duke, saying it was fine for him to turn around. Pirta then proposed they talk until they fell asleep. The Duke asked her to sleep, his hand reaching over Daisy to touch his daughter. After a moment, Pirta fell asleep. When she was completely asleep, Daisy asked the Duke if he was still awake. The Duke apologized for his daughter causing Daisy so much trouble. Daisy assured him it was fine. After some time, Daisy asked the Duke about the tree that Pirta loved so much and who Pirta's mother was. She added that if the question was too personal, he could avoid it, and she apologized for being intrusive. The Duke said it was fine and explained that Pirta was his older sister's daughter. Their parents passed away when they were young, and all their relatives were vying for the family assets. The Duke and his sister only had each other to rely on. She was 7 years older than him and officially inherited her place as the head of the household when she turned 20. She tried to take over the parenting role, and the Duke resisted. He mentioned that he used to cause more trouble than Pirta does now and was ungrateful to his sister. He owed a lot to her but couldn't repay her as she was no longer in this world. Daisy realized why he loved and cared for Pirta so much. The Duke said that taking care of Pirta was the favor his sister asked of him. The Duke thanked Daisy for everything she was doing. Initially, he believed that his daughter and he would be okay on their own. But after meeting Daisy, he realized he was mistaken. Daisy had longed for the Duke to recognize her efforts, but she never imagined her heart would beat so fast. She didn't know what to say. The Duke mentioned that if she felt uncomfortable, he would get up from the bed, but she shouldn't move, as Pirta might wake up. Daisy wondered if she turned around now, what expression would the Duke have? Would it be as cold and stern as usual, or would his face be flushed like hers? After a while, they both sat outside in the hall. Hattie came by and asked if they were unwell because they looked really tired. He mentioned they both seemed to be experiencing the same symptoms of parental fatigue syndrome. While they were talking, the Duke's eyes wandered to an alcohol bottle on the shelf, one he hadn't seen before. Hattie mentioned it was a gift from Baron Solfino when he attended the last party. He added that sometimes it's nice to have some quiet adult time to distress. It sounded like a good plan to the Duke and Daisy, so they started drinking. They were chatting when suddenly Pirta came looking for them. She wanted the Duke and Daisy to sleep with her again. The Duke said he wouldn't be sleeping tonight because he had to work all night, but Pirta told her dad that adults need their sleep too. The Duke, touched by her words, found it really cute and grabbed his daughter in his arms. Pirta mentioned he smelled like alcohol, and when Daisy grabbed her too, she had the same complaint. Pirta suggested that since they weren't sleeping, they should play a game. The Duke initially denied the request, but he couldn't say no to his beloved daughter, so he agreed. Pirta ran to bring the thread and cards. When she came back, she showed Daisy the thread game and asked her to solve it. Daisy understood it was a mix of cat's cradle and undoing knots. Pirta said that since Daisy won, she had to pick a penalty card. The penalty was for Pirta to kiss Daisy on the cheek. Daisy lost several times, and Pirta teased her for being bad at the game. The Duke mocked Daisy, saying that even though it was his first time playing, he would still be better than her. They started a playful competition. Hattie took Pirta to make sure she was put to bed and then left. The Duke and Daisy continued playing the game. At one point, a penalty card came up requiring a kiss on the other person's lips. Both Daisy and the Duke were shocked when they saw the card. With emotions running high and a penalty card demanding a kiss on the lips, will Daisy and the Duke face their true feelings? Their playful competition has taken a serious turn, leaving both shocked and uncertain about what happens next. Daisy got up to change the topic, mentioning that she should clean up. However, as she was drunk, she fell upon the Duke. Daisy apologized and said she would clean up the mess, but the Duke told her he thought she fell over because she was trying to run away without fulfilling the penalty. In that moment, Daisy, angry and influenced by alcohol, grabbed the Duke's face. The Duke was powerful and commanding enough to even dictate with his eyes. He feared nothing, but the situation was strange. Whenever he saw Daisy, she acted weird and out of character. Ever since breakfast that morning, when Hattie asked the Duke and Daisy what time they went to bed, Daisy had been acting strangely. Without touching her food, she ran outside. After that, Daisy ran away every time she saw the Duke. Daisy was running away from the Duke. But the actual situation was that yesterday he received a letter from the doctor. The letter said that if the patient wanted a special scented oil, he could prepare it, but the doctor needed a reply that day. Therefore, the Duke was reaching out to Daisy every time, but she kept running away. Later, when he saw Daisy and Pietra sitting on a chair, she made weird faces upon seeing him. The Duke told her he had been looking for her all day and needed to talk to her about something, but she ran away again. The Duke thought she was being weird and playing hide and seek with him, so he got into character and started looking for her all over the palace. Finally, he caught her. He entered her room and closed the door. The Duke asked her if she was busy, and she replied that she was on her way to see Hattie. But the Duke informed her that he had sent Hattie outside for some work. Even then, Daisy tried to avoid the conversation and asked if they could talk later, but the Duke clearly refused. Daisy told the Duke that it wouldn't ever happen again. The Duke responded, asking how she could be so sure. Daisy was talking about last night, while the Duke was talking about the time she was attacked by bees. They were thinking about completely different things. Daisy ran away, saying she was sorry she killed him like that. Last night, the Duke and Daisy kissed, and she fulfilled her penalty, which was why she was acting so strangely today. Daisy was talking about last night when she lost the game and had to pay the penalty to the Duke. But the Duke was talking about the bees. Later, the Duke, Daisy, Pirta, and Hattie were sitting in a chariot and going somewhere. Daisy and the Duke were sitting across from each other. Pirta was happy that this was their first outing together, and Daisy was also relieved that she had Pirta with her to avoid the awkward situation between her and the Duke. They reached their destination, and two women welcomed them into their store. The women informed them that they had everything they might need, including decorations, dolls, various games, and party tableware. Suddenly, Pirta informed the Duke and Daisy that she would go with Hattie. Daisy was shocked to hear this, as Pirta always used to go with Daisy, but today she ditched her, out of all days when Daisy needed her most. Hattie was confused by Pirta's sudden change in nature, as she never used to pay attention to him. Pirta told Daisy to go and shop with Dad. After some time, the Duke asked Daisy to join them because he had something he wanted to give her. He looked at the storekeeper and asked him to make sure it was fixed properly. When the shopkeeper opened the box, it was her necklace. Daisy wondered what her necklace was doing there. The Duke informed her that the jeweler at the store was quite famous and that it had been in good hands, so it should be perfect. Daisy had thought he would have thrown it away, but the Duke informed her that since he was the one who broke it in the first place, he was responsible for repairing it. Daisy was thinking of apologizing to the Duke as she had been acting awkwardly and ignoring him for some time. As she was about to turn around and say something, there was a man standing there. He was huge and had a beard. The man, who came from outside, noticed the crest on the carriage was of the Duke and came inside to meet him. The storewoman tried to tell the man that they were closed for private shopping, but the Duke interrupted and said it was fine. The Duke met him, shook his hand, and asked if he was back in Pontypool. The man replied, yes, for now. As these two were having a conversation, Daisy started thinking about the time when her friend, who created one of the suitors, used the name of a place she had always dreamt of going. She was always too busy working to take the time to go there. The character she created was the greatest bandit of all time, the ultimate bad boy, a heinous guild leader who dominated the black alleys. Daisy decided to warn the Duke about this. She held his hand and took him away to a small room below the stairs. The Duke was confused about what she was planning to do, but later she informed him that the man he was talking with, his grandson, is going to be one of the suitors. Daisy informed him that the man had been single his whole life. Everybody knew that he earned the title of Count with his excellent swordsmanship and that he was known for his meritorious service on the battlefield. The man never got married because he spent most of his life in battle, and they were assuming that he perhaps had a secret family or something. The Duke thought that the man was a principled, trustworthy man until the end, and there was no way he would be keeping his family, his own flesh and blood, hidden like that. Daisy wondered if she might have gotten the wrong name. The Duke informed her that he would still look into it, so at least there wouldn't be any surprises later on. While they were chatting, the door opened, and people were standing outside the door watching them. Hattie and the store woman saw them both inside. Daisy tried to explain that they might be misunderstanding the situation. In the palace later, Daisy was cleaning up the stuff that Pirta had spread. She noticed that the cards they were playing with yesterday were lying there, but suddenly she noticed something strange about the cards. Daisy noticed something off about the cards. She realized that yesterday there was a heart sign on the teddy, but today there was no heart. She remembered when her friends discussed making the female protagonist a puppet master. They thought it would be fun if the lead character were a puppet master who was excellent at scheming, and they decided she should be a duke's daughter. Daisy remembered that each friend added their own suitor, but when it came to the main female lead, they created the character together and unanimously agreed on that part. The next day at the breakfast table, Pirta prepared some juice and asked Daisy to drink it and let her know if it was tasty. Initially, Daisy thought that even if the juice was not tasty, she would have to pretend that it was great. However, it was actually very good. The Duke mentioned that Lady Rhodazin would like it too. They praised Pirta's juice-making skills. But when the Duke offered her another glass, she said that she would only drink 1 glass of juice per day, and asked the Duke and Daisy to finish it, saying she was going to clean her room. The Duke was a little sad that his daughter was maturing so fast, but Daisy thought it was unusual for Pirta to refuse another glass voluntarily, as she usually used all kinds of flattery to get the Duke to pour her another one. Daisy couldn't believe that Pirta was using her power of manipulation on the Duke and her. Daisy understood that Pirta wanted the Duke and her to become close, and if by any chance this was true, she would become involved with the Duke and become Pirta's stepmother. Daisy grasped Pirta's intention. As Pirta left the room, Hattie carried her and brought her back inside. He informed the Duke that the accountant was here and had an urgent report regarding last year's tax. The Duke decided to attend to this matter, and Pirta's plan to keep the Duke and Daisy together failed. After some time, the Duke and Daisy were hiding inside a cupboard because Hattie interrupted Pirta, which made her sad. She decided to play hide and seek and became the seeker. She herself advised the Duke and Daisy to hide inside the cupboard. The Duke informed Daisy that he had done some research, but there was nobody named Santorini in that guild, and the guild name was encrypted, making it hard to read. Daisy wondered what they should do. The Duke then revealed that he had found the location of a secret meeting. Daisy couldn't believe how much the Duke had managed to discover in such a short time. Daisy asked the Duke about the meeting date, thinking she should come along since she knew other names besides Santorini. If she could be there too, she might be able to gain more information. The Duke came close to Daisy and informed her that he always strives for perfection. Daisy decided she must be extra cautious because it would be dangerous. Suddenly, Hattie decided to join the hide and seek game and wanted to play with them. Pirta tried to stop him, but he was not ready to listen, so Pirta kicked Hattie. Pirta was crying as her dad scolded her for kicking Hattie. Her father also advised her to go and apologize to Hattie right away. Daisy thought that Pirta was definitely wrong in what she did, but watching her cry was breaking her heart. Daisy wanted to hug her, but all she could do was watch because the Duke said they must not spoil Pirta. After a while, Daisy went to her room. She was really exhausted, even though she had been inside all day. When she went towards her window, she noticed that Pirta and Hattie were sitting on the stairs outside. Daisy thought it looked like they had talked everything out, and Pirta was even letting Hattie touch her hair. Daisy wondered how they had gotten so close all of a sudden. What had actually happened a few hours earlier was that Pirta went to Hattie to apologize for kicking him. Hattie was not angry at all and said it was fine, and she didn't have to cry. Hattie asked Pirta why she had been acting strange lately and why she was trying to get the Duke and Daisy alone all the time. He also asked her if she didn't like being with Daisy anymore. Pirda informed him that she liked Daisy a lot and that she was her favorite. Hattie mentioned that he liked Daisy a lot too. Pirda was in deep shock as she had made up her mind that Daisy was going to marry her dad. Hattie smiled and said he was just kidding and that he was on Pirda's side. He also mentioned that Daisy was kind, strong, and cool, and he thought she was a good match for the Duke. Pirda mentioned that it was hard for her and that was why she was trying to stop him, because her dad and Daisy needed to be together. Pirda said that Daisy kept running away. Hattie informed her that she must be using the wrong approach, which was why it was so hard. Pirda asked him what she should do now. Hattie informed her that in order for love to grow between a man and a woman, they both must be interested in each other. To further clarify, he mentioned that the Duke must be interested in Daisy, and Daisy must be interested in the Duke. Pirda mentioned that her father liked Daisy, she liked Daisy, and everybody liked Daisy. So now the real question was, does Daisy like the Duke? Hattie mentioned that since Daisy kept running away, he thought she might not be interested. Pirda started crying and wanted Daisy to like her dad. She asked Hattie to help her in the situation since he was much closer to her father. Hattie gave it a thought and figured that getting involved in other people's love affairs was always entertaining, so they made up a plan. Hattie and Pirda made up a plan and called it their little secret. Hattie told Pirda that it was such a sensitive issue that they should keep it between themselves. Pirda and Hattie were both really excited about forming an alliance. He explained to Pirda that they would be partners and work on a big project together. Pirda asked Hattie to begin their pledging ceremony. Hattie asked what this pledging ceremony was and where she learned about it. She informed him that she read about it in a book, and that such ceremonies were for times like this. Pirda then allowed Hattie to touch her hair 3 times. They both completed the ceremony. The next day, Daisy was sneaking into Pirda's room slowly with a present in her hand, but Pirda was awake and jumped on Daisy. Pirda was really happy today because her friend was coming to meet her. The Duke also didn't sleep well because today was his beloved daughter's birthday, and he couldn't ruin it. It was especially significant because it was the first time she would be making a friend. Pirda saw the present and asked Daisy what it was and if she could open it. When Pirda opened the box, it was a pumpkin cake. Pirda was really happy, and everyone in the mansion wished her a happy birthday. Pirda was very cheerful and chatty, and it made everyone happy to see her like that. However, there was a small unexpected hiccup, and the joyful mood was interrupted when Rhodazen's mom and dad appeared at the party, even though they were not invited. They both tried their best to admire Pirda, but Pirda was sad and started crying. Daisy picked up Pirda and took her inside. In her mind, she was thinking how these people could ruin Pirda's birthday like this since they specifically told them only Lady Rhodazen was invited. Normally, parents would understand the situation and just send along a nanny or set up a time to pick the child up later. Rhodazen's dad asked if they could come inside. The Duke asked if they had brought their invitation. When the Duke checked the invitation, he mentioned that only Lady Rhodazen's name was on it. He then mocked them by saying that inviting themselves to an event for which they hadn't received a proper invitation was impolite, and showed them the way to their carriage. They had no choice but to do as they were told. They tried to hold out as long as possible, but they couldn't go against the Duke's wishes. Once Rhodazen's parents left, they were finally able to greet her properly. Rhodazen and Pirda stood next to each other, and Pirda was being shy now. Rhodazen's nanny asked her to give Pirda the present. During their first meeting, Daisy had informed Rhodazen of Pirda's favorite color, and she hadn't forgotten that and brought a present in the same color. The birthday celebration began, and everyone was invited to come inside. The Duke mentioned that there was still a long way to go and asked everyone to get inside the palace. Daisy was thinking and imagining the 2 little ones as adults, exchanging cold, contemptuous glances in the original story. She also knew that the plot was changing, and she was not sure what would come. But now Daisy was more excited than afraid. The Duke and Daisy were peeking inside a room silently. Inside, Pirda and Rhodazen were alone because Pirda had informed them that the Duke and Daisy should not interrupt her, no matter what happens. She would be the one who served the juice before the party began. The Duke and Daisy were trying to listen to their gossip, but suddenly Pirda was coming toward the door. The Duke pulled Daisy, and they hid inside a cupboard. The Duke mentioned that they should stay in the cupboard for a while. Daisy said that it felt cozy in there. The Duke was thinking that since his daughter was super excited today, it would be hard to get her to go to bed tonight. He then remembered that Countess Lapel had given birth yesterday, and informed Daisy. He also mentioned that it was a healthy boy who looked just like his parents, red eyes and all. And now that the baby was born, Lapel was really hitting the books hard. Daisy said that it was wonderful, but she was worried when he invited the couple, thinking something might go wrong. The Duke looked at Daisy and asked if she thought he might do something wrong. The Duke smiled and said that he thought they both knew each other quite well, but he guessed not. He mentioned one more thing. The guild had their eyes on them and would have their secret meeting tomorrow. Daisy was shocked to hear this and was relieved that it was not on the same day as Pirda's birthday. The Duke mentioned that it was not something to get excited about, and with a smile, he brushed Daisy's hair with his fingers and said that he was more worried for her than she was. Daisy blushed, and while she was thinking about the feelings she was having, assuming that the Duke had feelings for her, Pirda opened the cupboard and hit Daisy on the head. Pirda asked Rhodazin to come with her to the mirror room now. Everyone standing outside welcomed the lady, and everyone entered the mirror room. For Daisy, it was the first time she would be seeing the mirror room decorated like this. As people entered the mirror room, everyone was amazed. There were pumpkins all around and a chandelier with baby pumpkins. It was truly a pumpkin lover's heaven. Daisy wondered if they had bought every single pumpkin-related product in the country. While she was checking around, her eyes were caught by something. Daisy was amazed by the mirror room, but suddenly something else caught her attention. The Duke was standing in front of something covered with a white cloth. It was huge. Pirda asked her dad what it was. The Duke responded that it was a gift for her. When she grabbed the cloth and removed it, there was a beautiful and huge fountain. Everyone was so shocked to see it. Pirda and Rhodazin started putting their heads inside the water of the fountain and drinking it. Daisy was worried about both of them and asked what they were doing. Pirda informed Daisy that it was not water, it was actually pumpkin juice. Hattie mentioned that they managed to complete the fountain in time. For a while, they thought they wouldn't be able to meet the deadline. Daisy was thinking that all the liquid flowing through the fountain was pumpkin juice, and she had seen a fountain like that in her past life. But it was only in the dessert section of a buffet, and had only 3 layers. The Duke originally wanted to build an artificial pond filled with juice in the garden, but he thought it might be a bit unsanitary, regardless of how well maintained it was. However, the fountain he ordered to be created was well constructed, so the beverages circulated through the pipes properly. He knew that the juice could be emptied out afterward, and it could be used as a regular fountain. The Duke asked Hattie if they should put it in Pirda's room. Hattie responded that it would be a good idea, sir. Daisy saw Pirda having fun with Rhodazin, both holding each other's hands. Later, everyone gathered to cut the cake. Pirda was really happy today. Her laughter and her expression were the happiest Daisy had ever seen during her entire time at the mansion. Later, it was time for Rhodazin to go back to her family. Pirda and Rhodazin were holding each other's hands, thinking about the time they enjoyed together. Pirda told Rhodazin that she was going to frame the drawing they did together and hang it up in her room for a long, long time. Rhodazin thanked her for the invitation and praised the delicious food the chef prepared for them and the fun game of hide and seek they played in the garden. Both children hugged each other and promised to meet soon. A few hours later, when Pirda was lying down on her bed, she was still worried about whether Rhodazin had reached her home safely. The next morning, after Pirda's birthday party, peace and quiet returned to the mansion. However, Daisy was becoming anxious because it was the day of the secret meeting connected to the mysterious male leader who would one day become the guild leader. Daisy was worried about the situation because the meeting was not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, but actually today. As the secret meeting drew closer, her anxiety and concern grew. Initially, she thought it wouldn't bother her, but she was wrong. The Duke entered the room wearing black clothing. He approached Daisy and informed her to cover her face properly. He also instructed her that no matter what happened today, she must not leave his side. For a moment, Daisy wondered if he was worried about her. From his appearance, he looked like an ordinary man going out for the night. Daisy smiled, and when the Duke asked what was so funny, she said it was nothing and reassured him that she would be extremely helpful this time, guaranteeing it. She mentioned that her friend was well known for her scientific mind and was a highly sought-after math instructor. Unsurprisingly, her friend wasn't very good at writing novels. When creating the guild leader suitor, she resorted to the tactic of selecting names based on things she liked, such as her favorite food, song, and place. So finding clues for Daisy wouldn't be hard as long as she knew what those were. When they reached the bar, the Duke told Daisy not to call him sir. She replied that she should have asked for a wig from Hattie. Daisy had expected the secret meeting to take place in an abandoned warehouse or a back alley. The Duke explained that there was a chance knights or patrolmen might be lurking around those places, and he was sure the people coming for the meeting were smart enough to avoid gathering in suspicious locations. He compared it to the story of the Eunice house, which turned out to be a hotspot for large-scale gambling. Daisy noticed that the customers here looked pretty ordinary, but the Duke stood out. Even if he was covering himself, he still had a noble stature. From behind Daisy, a waiter came and asked if they had ordered 2 beers, placing the beers on the table. As Daisy was about to turn around to complain about the service, she recognized the waiter as a guard from the mansion. She looked at the Duke and suddenly realized that everyone sitting inside the pub worked at Henstone Mansion. Daisy was amazed and recalled when the Duke told her that he always strived for perfection. She thought he had arranged all of this because she might be in danger. The seats were still empty in the bar. Daisy told the Duke that they couldn't all have gone to the bathroom, to which the Duke replied that it looked like they were getting started soon. He mentioned that if anyone left their seat, they should follow. The Duke was mumbling about the possibility of a secret passage. Suddenly, Daisy remembered that there were stairs leading to the basement. Daisy mentioned to the Duke that she remembered a passage and informed him that there are stairs here that lead to the basement. The Duke asked Daisy how she knew about this. She responded that she had been to this bar before and remembered seeing stairs that led to the basement. Daisy also mentioned that it was dark and gloomy, making it perfect for secret meetings. She also told the Duke that she came here with Polyp and that he fell down the stairs once because he was drunk, which is how she learned about the basement. The Duke seemed to forget who Polyp was, so Daisy reminded him about the dummy who sold that necklace. The Duke's face changed when he heard that Daisy came here with Polyp. Daisy tried to tell the Duke that she came here with the staff at the restaurant, but at that moment, they saw a guy going downstairs. They decided to follow him, and the Duke instructed Daisy not to leave his side. Daisy felt very different down here. It was very dark, and when they reached the basement, they heard some voices coming from a slightly open door. The Duke held Daisy's hand and took her near the door very carefully. Inside the room, some people were talking about not having received the deposit yet. It seemed like someone had refused to give them money because it was illegal. A man with a red shawl was sitting in front, with a hooded cap on his head and his foot on the table. The person with the red shawl was advising his men to make an example out of someone, so people might think twice about not paying if they knew their life was at stake. Daisy couldn't see the guild leader's face as it was hidden by the hood. The people inside ended the meeting, but Daisy was unable to gather any clues about the suitor yet. Suddenly, she heard someone mention that the girl's name until the next meeting is Mal. Daisy quickly figured out that it would be Maldive. She informed the Duke that she hadn't been there, but her friend talked about it non-stop. This was the right guild. It was definitely related to the suitor Santorini. Their hunch was right because, as they were trying to leave that place, someone inside asked the boss if their son's fever had broken yet. Inside, the red hooded cap was removed, revealing a blue-haired woman. She mentioned that her son was getting better and that a little fever was nothing. After all, how was he going to inherit this guild otherwise? After this, the Duke asked Daisy to leave. Daisy thought that dealing with lapels was a piece of cake compared to this, and she realized that the guild leader was even willing to kill anyone for money. She believed that such a woman could be the mother of the suitor. When the Duke and Daisy reached the top of the bar, they noticed that people were staring at them. A man with a beard started questioning them, asking what they were doing downstairs. The man roughly repeated his question. The Duke, without hesitating, asked him to move. The bearded man, confused and not expecting such a response, asked if he needed to repeat himself and told him to move again. The bearded man placed his hand on the table and remarked that there's always one person who doesn't follow orders, even when asked nicely. The man then said the Duke didn't look like a regular and demanded he show his face and remove the cloak. This time, he warned them to remove the cloak or he would rip off their faces. The Duke complied, revealing his face. The people at the bar were shocked to see the Duke in such a place. An old man called for silence and then addressed the Duke, saying he never expected to see someone of his stature here and assumed the Duke wasn't here to join their guild. The man guessed that the Duke was there to hire them for a job, but noted it wasn't a good time because many eyes were watching. The Duke said he had been curious about the place for a while, but, having seen it, decided it wasn't for him. The man smiled, saying it's not for those who have lived sheltered lives. He then remarked that all of Pontypool would be talking about the scandal of the Duke visiting a back alley guild with a woman he had been hiding. As he said this, he grabbed Daisy's hand. The man told the Duke that, being incredibly wealthy, he could probably buy everyone off. The Duke responded that he would, if he were there for personal reasons, but that night he was on official business. The man retorted that he didn't know much about governing, but knew it was the Duke's job to look after the people. He then asked the Duke to help him retire. The Duke replied that he didn't offer that to just anyone, and said there was only one thing he could offer a lowlife like him, to let Daisy go right now, and then he would spare his life. The man became angry, not only because the intruder wouldn't listen to him, but also because the Duke's gaze made him feel small and insignificant. He ordered his men to attack the Duke. The man was about to swing his punch at the Duke, but suddenly knights came in and started protecting the Duke. The Duke ordered them to arrest everyone, pointing out that the leader was downstairs in the basement. The Duke emerged with Daisy, and the people were all confused and staring at them. Some were frightened, realizing the assassin had been killed. People started asking the Duke questions about what had brought him there, and he was getting attention from all sides. They also began talking about Daisy, noting how the Duke was keeping her safe beside him. As the Duke and Daisy left the bar, people stared at them and talked among themselves. They got into the carriage and headed for the palace. On the way, the Duke asked Daisy if she was surprised, explaining that he needed time to discreetly bring in the knights. Daisy, trembling, was reassured by the Duke, who mentioned that this was why he insisted on going alone. Daisy said she was fine, but she never imagined the knights would be there. She meant she didn't realize the Duke was so well prepared. The Duke reiterated that he couldn't stand by when he knew it would be dangerous. He wasn't sure what would happen, but he prepared for the worst-case scenario. Daisy thought the Duke wanted to protect her from any danger he might encounter. She couldn't ignore it any longer and noticed that the Duke was giving her special treatment. The Duke then told Daisy that he wondered if it might be best to let it go but decided it would be better to clear things up. Daisy was puzzled about what he was trying to say. The Duke mentioned that he was talking about the kiss. He apologized for any confusion and mentioned that he didn't want to seem impudent, especially to her. He added that they would be spending a lot of time together and he didn't want things to get uncomfortable between them. Daisy reflected that while she had dated a bit in her life, she wasn't so experienced that she wouldn't be affected by a kiss. On the other hand, she thought the Duke must have had experience with numerous noble ladies because he was young, handsome, and had the whole package, wealth, power, etc. Daisy apologized for causing trouble and asked him to forget about everything. The Duke asked why he should forget about it, revealing that it was his first kiss. Daisy was shocked to hear this. The Duke explained that he had been busy raising a child and didn't have time for things like that. Daisy thought she wouldn't have dated either if she had been raising little Chestnut at a young age. Suddenly, she realized that this was also a scheme orchestrated by Pirta. Hattie and Pirta noticed that the Duke and Daisy were back and thought everything seemed to have gone well. Pirta was excited and wanted to meet Daisy, but Hattie stopped her, saying, "Look at them." When they looked, they saw the Duke and Daisy enjoying themselves, so Hattie decided to come up with a plan. Hattie asked Pirta to block all the people who were going outside to see her and Daisy. Since Pirta was the Duke's daughter, everyone obeyed her orders. The next day, the Duke and Daisy were having tea and discussing the previous day's incident. Daisy mentioned that the guild leader's mother worked as a healer for a free company named the Alps. Reflecting on all the names, Daisy thought her friend must have really wanted to go on vacation because all the names were of travel destinations. Daisy wondered why these people had been hiding from the Count, considering he might have helped them. The Duke suggested it wasn't really hiding. They were probably unaware they were related. However, Daisy thought the guild leader probably knew, since the child, the suitor, would become the guild leader in the future, and the guild was named Santorini. He must have heard something from his mother. The Duke said they couldn't rule out the possibility that they were hiding for another reason and asked Daisy to consider that Count Santorini was honored with his title after receiving recognition. Consequently, many people likely approached him, claiming some relation similar to winning the lottery. The Duke didn't trust people with a criminal background, especially those associated with a guild like that. When the Duke reached for the kettle, Daisy interrupted, offering to pour him another cup. The Duke explained that it wasn't for him, he was going to pour a cup for Daisy. Daisy thought that she had seen him do this for Pirta a few times. They resumed their conversation, and Daisy mentioned that if the Count heard he had a family he didn't know about, he'd probably be really surprised. She added that the Count was very fond of children. After earning his title, the first thing he did was sponsor an orphanage. The Count, who lived his life on the battlefield like a mercenary, had a soft, grandfather-like side to him. Considering this, the Duke and Daisy devised a plan using Pirta's cuteness. In the palace, the Count came for dinner as he was invited by the Duke. Pirta was very afraid of the Count. The Count praised Pirta's hairstyle, saying he had seen similar styles during his mercenary days. Daisy was consoling Pirta and had no idea she would be afraid of the Count. She thought she had miscalculated. Daisy hoped the Count would naturally open up about his family after seeing the cute little Chestnut. The Count mentioned to the Duke that his daughter reminded him of the past when a new soldier joined the Free Company. Their head was shaved, but nobody looked better than your daughter. Pirta looked at the Count, but she was still a little bit scared. The Duke asked Pirta to sit in her own seat. The Count told her not to be afraid of him, explaining that whenever he goes to the orphanage, most of the children cry when they see him. Pirta turned around, looked at him, and asked if he was a sheep person. The Count laughed hard and said that Pirta is a funny lady, but he was not a sheep person. He added that he loved sheep so much that he carries them around on his chin, referring to his beard. After listening to this, Pirta jumped from her seat and went near the Count. Pirda asked the Count if she could pet his sheep. The Count didn't deny and held her up. Pirda liked his beard so much, she felt it was soft like a cloud. Pirda asked the Count if the sheep lived together in flocks and ate grass and leaves. The Count, wondering how she knew so much, praised her intelligence and called her a smart lady. Pirda was happy and proud. When the Count's stomach growled, Pirda thought the sheep were hungry. She looked around, saw a piece of broccoli, picked it up, and tried putting it in the Count's beard. The Duke and Daisy were worried by her actions, but all Pirda wanted to do was feed the sheep as they were hungry. The Duke apologized to the Count, and Daisy asked Pirda not to do that again. While they were making Pirda understand, the Count was looking at them and smiling. As the Count was having wine, he said that he couldn't express his gratitude because he has always been single and wasn't often invited to family meals. The Duke and Daisy looked at each other and thought this was their opportunity. The Count also mentioned that every time he sees a sweet child, he wishes he had grandchildren of his own, but he thought it was too late for that. The Duke informed him that he has a family of his own, a daughter and a grandson. The Count was confused by what the Duke was saying. The Duke then mentioned that while he was in the Alps Free Company, he met a woman. Andy Narita, the suitor's mother, was kept in jail by the Duke's knights. From inside the jail, she shouted to be let out and constantly asked about her son. She noticed someone approaching. It was the Duke. Andy asked the Duke why he was doing this, why he had orchestrated a surprise raid by the knights, and where her son was. The Duke apologized for separating her from her son but explained that he didn't need a reason to arrest an illegal guild. Andy retorted that if his intent was to arrest them, he wouldn't have taken her son, and she insisted that he tell her the truth about his actions. The Duke informed her that she and her son would affect his daughter's future. Andy was shocked to hear this. Shortly afterward, the Count arrived with Andy's son, who ran to his mother and hugged her. The Count asked Andy if her name was Andy Narita. Confused, Andy asked how he knew her name. The Count also asked if Celine Narita was her mother, then removed a locket from his pocket containing Andy's mother's photograph. She was stunned to see this and demanded to know why he had a portrait of her mother. At that moment, Daisy arrived and addressed the Count as Santorini. Andy recognized the name and mentioned she had heard it once before her mother passed away. The Count fell to his knees and began crying, saying he had no idea he had a daughter. Furious, Andy told him to shut up or she would beat him because he had never been around, and now he was suddenly showing up. Andy also told the Count that she didn't know him and never wanted to. He had abandoned her mother and her, and now he was affecting her son too. Daisy interrupted, explaining that the Count was a mercenary who traveled all over the continent. He had merely left for a short while, and her mother had left while he was away. Andy dismissed this as an excuse. Daisy asked if her mother had ever said anything bad about her father when she mentioned the name Santorini. Andy responded that it was too late now, as her mother had struggled her whole life before passing away, and now it didn't matter. Daisy informed her that if things continued like this, she might never see her son grow up. Andy was confused about what was happening. Daisy, being the author of the story, knew that according to the initial plot, the guild leader grows up an orphan if the story cannot be changed. However, it was difficult for her to explain this to Andy. Daisy asked Andy if she wanted her son to grow up all alone without any parents, as she did. Daisy continued, saying that Andy's mother always wanted her to be happy right up until her last breath. The Count was still crying and begging for forgiveness, admitting that it was his fault. Andy's heart melted, and she also apologized to her father. Seeing all this, Daisy became emotional too and started crying. The Duke consoled her and tried to wipe her tears. After that, she hugged the Duke and cried a little longer. The next day, the Duke and Daisy were sitting and having tea when he handed a few papers to Daisy. It was an application for the night training school. The Duke thought it would convince the guild leader too. Daisy correctly assumed it was for Andy's son. She wondered if it was a good idea to send the future suitor to night school. The Duke informed her that it would take some time for them to reconcile, but he also knew that the mother and son were staying at the Count's estate without any issues. He believed the Count wanted to register both of them as his family and send his grandchild to the academy right away. However, the Duke worried that it would be hard for the child to fit in there because it was already filled with noble children. That's why he prepared for the night training school, which was different. It was a boarding school where young men learned to follow and obey the rules. It was known for its strict discipline and sword training. The school also fostered a strong sense of solidarity among its trainees, and the bond between seniors and juniors was strong. After reading it, Daisy thought it would be the best route for the boy, and if all went to plan, he would never have to cross paths with little Chestnut. Daisy was worried if Andy would return to the guild, but the Duke informed her that the Count wouldn't let that happen. He wanted his daughter to get on the right path since he had already missed so much of her life. Even the Duke wouldn't let that happen because once the mother and son became part of the Count's family, it would be easier for him to track how they were doing. Daisy mistakenly called the Duke by his first name, and he insisted she call him Dane. The Duke informed her that they should be on a first-name basis since they would be working closely together. Daisy was puzzled because society revolved around class. As he was a duke, just below the emperor, and she was just a commoner, how could she address him by his first name? Nevertheless, she decided to accept it. The Duke put his finger on Daisy's cheek and thanked her for everything she had done and would do in the future. Daisy also thanked him. She liked when the Duke trusted her. As he was leaving, he remembered something, turned around, and gave a pouch to Daisy. He informed her that he was supposed to give it to her yesterday, but things got really busy. When she opened it, she was shocked. The Duke gave Daisy her first income as she completed 30 days at the mansion. She noticed that it was gold coins, not silver. She consulted with the Duke, and he informed her that he had initially promised to give her 10 times the usual amount. Daisy realized he was serious about this promise. Sometime later, the Duke was sitting in his room with his hand on his head, wondering why he kept watching Daisy's lips so closely. He was confused and going mad because this had never happened to him before. He hadn't realized how beautiful she looked with a smile on her face, reminding him of a spring flower in full bloom. The Duke was shocked and his cheeks turned red as he noticed that he called her beautiful in his thoughts. Hattie came into his room, and the Duke asked him if his current workload was heavier than usual. Hattie responded that nowadays, the Duke was working a lot less than usual, and was busy with other matters. When the Duke asked about his daughter, Hattie informed him that she was drawing and wanted to gift it to Daisy to celebrate her 30 days at the mansion. Daisy asked Pirta to spend a day with her in the city, but Pirta turned her down, saying she was busy. Daisy was happy because she thought it was nice to have a day to herself once in a while, and since she got paid today, it called for a little shopping. So, Daisy went to the market and visited the store. The store woman welcomed Daisy, and Daisy informed her that she was there to buy gifts for a child and a young gentleman. The store woman said they had something perfect for that, which the little lady would love. She then showed Daisy a brilliantly handcrafted hairband with a pumpkin on top, and the part that touches the ear was lined with soft cotton for comfort. Daisy was happy with the recommendation and decided to take it. The store woman also asked Daisy if she wanted to see other items they had in stock. Daisy looked at all of them and chose a gift for Hattie as well. Now it was time for her to purchase a gift for the Duke. The store woman mentioned that men like him were the most difficult to shop for, but then she showed Daisy a pen that was directly imported from the continent of Dulcer. It was rare to find an azure stone with such clarity, and this particular pen had an especially elegant finish compared to the rest. Seeing the pen, Daisy remembered the color of the Duke's eyes, as it matched the stone color. It was a bit pricey, but it was worth every penny, so Daisy decided to take that as well. After she left the store, it was finally time to hit a restaurant. Daisy entered the restaurant, and there was a woman standing there who knew Daisy from before she worked for the Duke. Daisy and the woman greeted each other and exchanged words about how long it had been since they last saw each other. The lady was proud that Daisy was working with the Duke nowadays. After that, the lady asked Daisy if she knew about the woman the Duke had fallen in love with. Daisy was shocked to hear this. As the woman asked Daisy about the Duke's love rumor, Daisy was shocked to hear this. The lady then informed Daisy about the recent arrest of a member of an illegal guild. Daisy was stunned, as she was directly involved in that incident. The woman explained that apparently, the Duke only carried out the arrest to rescue the woman he loved because the guild had kidnapped her. Daisy was in shock, as this was new information for her. The woman also mentioned that she didn't know who the woman with the Duke was, but she had heard that she was quite beautiful. The people who were at the scene had said so. Daisy knew that gossip could get out of hand, but this was ridiculous to her because she was the only one with the Duke that day. When the woman asked Daisy if she was unaware of this, Daisy gently declined. Suddenly, a couple sitting at another table intervened in the conversation, informing them that the latest word they heard from their neighbor's cousin's boyfriend was that the woman who managed to capture the Duke's attention was actually a princess from a distant land. While Daisy listened to all these rumors, she wondered what was happening and what kind of nonsense people were spreading. She stood up and said she had to leave because she couldn't bear to listen to any of it anymore. Back at the mansion, Hattie brought in a few letters that the Duke needed to review. He noticed that Pirta was sitting inside and drawing something. Pirta wanted to go to the city with Daisy, but she had to draw this gift for her. Hattie told Pirta that she should have taken the time to draw it beforehand so that she could have gone out to the city with Daisy. Pirta continued making her drawing and asked Hattie to get back to what he was doing. After some time, Pirta finished her drawing and showed it to her dad. She sat on her dad's lap and started showing all the drawings she had made. The first one was of herself holding a pumpkin. The second was of a sheep eating some broccoli. The next drawing was of the Duke and Daisy holding hands together. The Duke praised Pirta's drawing skills and told her that he could see she had put a lot of work into each page. Pirta was worried and asked her dad if Daisy would like all of it. Suddenly, Pirta heard that Daisy had come back and rushed towards her, hugging her. While the Duke was looking at the drawing his daughter made as a present for Daisy, he thought of something and told Daisy that tomorrow they would be going to an island. The next day, Daisy was busy packing for the trip to the island, but she seemed a bit confused. Pirta entered the room and asked what she was doing. Daisy informed her that she was packing but was having difficulty because no space was left, yet she had so much to pack. Pirta noticed that there were many of her things that Daisy was packing. Daisy explained that she would rather take it all with them just in case, rather than end up needing something they didn't have. Daisy wanted to be fully prepared since it was their first trip. Suddenly, Pirta made a face and said that she would stay at home. Daisy was shocked to hear this. Pirta told Daisy that she should go with her dad. Daisy informed her that if she didn't go on the trip, Daisy also wouldn't be able to go because it would not be proper for two adults like her and the Duke to go on a trip alone. After listening to this, Pirta started thinking. Daisy told her that she really wanted to go to this island, and Pirta quickly changed her mind and said that she would go too. They hugged each other, both excited for the trip. Daisy looked at the presents she had bought for people and thought that packing those was the only thing left to do. After a while, they were on a ship in the middle of the ocean, and Pirta was enjoying the view. Daisy asked her to be careful as it was dangerous to hang over the edge of the ship like that. They had a conversation about seagulls and what kind of food they eat. Everybody was having a blast, but Hattie was not feeling well because of motion sickness and was vomiting. The Duke told him this was why he had insisted Hattie not come and stay at the mansion. But still, Hattie came. Pirta consoled Hattie, telling him he would be fine on the trip. Daisy marveled at how well these two got along. The navigator informed the Duke that they were almost at their destination. The Duke said he could see the dock from there and asked to prepare for disembarking. As they landed from the ship, people welcomed the Duke. Daisy asked the Duke if he had employees residing on this island as well. The Duke confirmed, saying that way he could visit anytime. Daisy marveled at the Duke's incredible wealth and wondered what else he could afford. Suddenly, a man reached out to Daisy, noting that the gap between the dock and the ship was fairly wide, and offered her his hand. The Duke watched this interaction. When the navigator reached out to Daisy and offered her a hand to cross the dock, the Duke interrupted, gave his hand instead, and asked the navigator to disembark. Daisy smiled warmly, took the Duke's hand, and stepped onto the island. As she entered, she was amazed, wondering if the annex was this big, how big the main building would be. The workers on the island offered them glasses of juice, and the woman who served the juice was wearing traditional island attire. Daisy and the Duke were sitting on chairs when Pirta came and started pulling Daisy's hand, asking her to come and play in the ocean. Daisy told Pirta that she would get changed and then join her. She was still marveling at how gorgeous the place was. Pirta started playing in the water, and Daisy began laughing because Pirta looked less like a child and more like a cherry tomato. Someone had forgotten to eat on the beach. Pirta called for her dad as well. But when Daisy looked at the Duke, she noticed he seemed a little different today. She told Pirta that she thought her dad needed to rest. But as she turned back towards Pirta, Pirta threw a starfish at Daisy's face and started laughing. The Duke approached Daisy and told Pirta not to tease her as it was making Daisy uncomfortable. Seeing this, Hattie Hyder formulated a plan and whispered something in Pirta's ear. Then Hattie grabbed a bucket full of water and looked towards the Duke. The Duke understood that Hattie was about to throw the water on him and warned him. But Hattie didn't listen and splashed the water on the Duke. The Duke was soaked. He went back and removed his t-shirt. And this was the first time Daisy saw him shirtless. She was surprised that she hadn't noticed it before, but the Duke had a great body. The Duke came close to Daisy and asked for a towel. Hattie and Pirta looked at each other and smiled, knowing their mission was successful. Daisy offered a towel to the Duke, who called Hattie over while he was enjoying his time with Pirta. He informed Hattie that his salary would be docked for a month. Hattie was in extreme shock and started crying. Pirta thought something good had happened to Hattie, which is why he was crying happily. Daisy turned around, looked at the Duke, and noticed that he had a blush on his face. Later, when they were all having food, Daisy and Pirta were completely full. They noticed a beautiful sunset over the ocean. Daisy thought it had been so long since she had enjoyed a sunset like this. It was truly beautiful. She remembered the gifts she had brought for all of them and wondered when she should give them out. She decided to do it now and started distributing the gifts. Daisy began with Pirta and gave her the headband she had brought. Pirta was really excited, thinking that even though her birthday had passed, she was still receiving gifts. She was very happy. Daisy informed her that it wasn't anything too special, but she wanted to commemorate her first paycheck. Daisy also had a gift for Hattie. They both started opening their gifts. When Pirta saw the hairband with a pumpkin on it, she was really happy and liked it very much. She thanked Daisy for it, and Hattie was also happy with the gift he received. Daisy glanced at the Duke and wondered if it would be appropriate to give him his gift now. She hesitated, worried about giving him the wrong impression. Suddenly, Pirta looked at Hattie and said, "The sun has set." This was a code sentence they had planned earlier. After this, they both started walking away from Daisy and the Duke, announcing that they were going for a walk and that Daisy and her dad couldn't join them. Now, Daisy and the Duke were sitting alone. It felt really weird and awkward for Daisy to give the Duke his gift now. She regretted not giving it to him while Pirta and Hattie were still there. The silence between them was overwhelming. Daisy noticed it was getting quite dark and wondered if she would be able to give him the gift today. Suddenly, the Duke called out to Daisy and grabbed her hand. Daisy asked the Duke what had happened all of a sudden and wondered why he was holding her hand. The Duke and Daisy saw the fireflies, which were the most famous attraction. Daisy was really amazed to see all of this because she had never seen fireflies in real life before. Daisy was having a good time, and the Duke was really happy that he could do something that Daisy would like. Daisy was feeling content. Today was a wonderful day for her. It was almost like a gift, and she didn't want to forget the moment or this feeling ever. She thanked the Duke for this day and handed him the gift she had brought for him. Daisy informed the Duke that it was just a small gift, and he might already have one, and she was sure that he might not actually need it. The Duke mentioned that he thought there would be no gift for him, but when he opened it, he found a fountain pen. Daisy explained that she thought this pen might suit him because the color matched his eyes. The Duke was silent for a while, and Daisy thought that he didn't like it. But after a while, the Duke pressed the gift and told Daisy that he would cherish it forever, and he liked it. Daisy was glad to hear this and was really happy. They both gave each other a stare, and suddenly Daisy looked away because she was shy. They both started watching the fireflies again, and they were enjoying it. It was so quiet there that Daisy could hear the Duke's breathing. Suddenly, Daisy's lips twitched. She found that there was some insect on her face. She started worrying, and suddenly both of them noticed that there were a lot of insects. After a while, they both decided that they should head back inside their hotel. The next morning, when Daisy completed all the packing as they were about to leave, Pirta and Hattie came back, but both of their faces were filled with mosquito bites. Daisy was worried about them and started looking for ointment. They returned to the Duke's mansion from the trip, or we could say, the dreamlike trip. Pirta was standing in front of a door and asked Daisy to quickly come in, as a different gift Daisy was not expecting was waiting for her. Pirta called Daisy inside the room, and as she did, Daisy noticed the mosquito bites on Pirta's face. Daisy wondered how those mosquitoes could harm such a sweet face. After Daisy entered the room, Pirta told her to settle down and then started explaining her drawings one by one. The first drawing was of the first time Daisy met Pirta. The second one was of Pirta and a pumpkin because she likes pumpkins. Daisy also noticed that the Duke and Hattie were standing near the door, watching Pirta explain the drawings one by one. There were many different drawings, and Pirta was the main subject in many of them. However, there were a few drawings that she wanted to give to Daisy, each one made with Daisy in mind. Lastly, Pirta showed her a drawing and said it was a gift to celebrate the 30 days since they had met. Daisy was really touched by this gift and hugged Pirta, telling her that she loved the gift very much. From that day onwards, Daisy developed a habit of putting Pirta's drawings in frames and hanging them on the wall. While Daisy was looking at the drawings Pirta made, Pirta came running towards Daisy and told her that she wanted to read with her. Daisy quickly agreed and started walking towards Pirta's room. As they walked, Pirta explained that reading is very important. As soon as they reached the room, Daisy noticed that the Duke was sitting inside Pirta's room, sitting on her chair. Daisy asked the Duke if he wasn't supposed to be in his office, but the Duke looked at Pirta. Daisy wondered if they had fallen for one of Pirta's schemes again. However, Daisy later thought that she shouldn't jump to conclusions as the Duke likes to spend as much time with Pirta as possible. Pirta was roaming around the room, making Daisy feel dizzy from watching her walk in circles. Then there was a knock at the door, and it was Hattie. Hattie informed the Duke that there was an urgent matter needing his attention, and was glad to find him here. Daisy and the Duke wondered why Hattie was talking so strangely. He handed the Duke an envelope. It was a fancy envelope from the Imperial Palace. The Duke looked a bit tense upon seeing the envelope and said he couldn't believe it was already time. Pirta mentioned excitedly that they were going to a dance. Daisy had no idea about this. Hattie asked the Duke if, this year as well, he was going to go alone. He also mentioned that, once again, the Duke would receive many proposals. Daisy wondered what he meant by proposals. Hattie also hoped that this year the Duke could be accompanied by someone, noting it wasn't like he could put on a dress and go with him. Pirta already imagined Hattie in a woman's dress. Daisy had no idea what they had been talking about earlier, so she asked Hattie. Hattie informed Daisy that, as it was her first time hearing about this, it was a social event held once a year at the Royal Palace, the largest ball in the entire empire. All members of the imperial family would be attending. Daisy thought about Lipman the 19th, Empress Anat, as well as first Prince Glenbrenter and second Prince Edward Chester. The Duke mentioned that the second prince was probably still a child. Hattie was surprised that Daisy knew so much about the imperial family. Daisy thought to herself that of course she knew everything about it because the ball would be a chance for her to meet another male suitor. More importantly, she was the one who created that character with her heart and soul. Daisy remembered the character she created, long hair down to his waist, emerald green eyes, an obsessive lover capable of destroying an entire family with his bare hands while smiling. Daisy thought this character was exactly her type, but as of now, he would still be a child. Hattie mentioned that this was the only ball that the Lord of the Magic Tower attended. Daisy was shocked to learn this. The Duke asked Daisy if they could talk in private for a moment. After they went outside for a walk, the Duke told Daisy that he remembered the second prince and the next Lord of the Magic Tower were key male suitors, but the prince was a character she created herself, a giant and obsessive lover. Daisy was proud of the character she created. She wondered if the second prince would be seated in the crown prince's seat in the near future. The first prince was 15 years older than the second prince and not very interested in becoming the crown prince, perhaps because the second prince would end up being the suitor. Daisy couldn't believe that her beloved characters would appear at this ball. Suddenly, she remembered Hattie mentioning that the Duke would be receiving many proposals this year. Curious, she asked the Duke, but after asking, she questioned her thoughts and tried to change the topic. The Duke mentioned that it was nothing important, just an invitation from the Imperial Palace that he must attend, no matter how tiresome it may be. Many nobles with debutantes and their families would attend, so there were several new faces every new year. Daisy thought this would be a place for nobles from across the entire empire to gather. It would be a battle of the stars, and she wondered who would be the brightest of them all. Since the Duke didn't show his face in high society much, this would be a rare opportunity for the nobles and ladies who lived far away to meet him. It was only natural that talk of marriage would be buzzing everywhere, but all these thoughts bothered Daisy very much. After thinking for a minute, Daisy asked the Duke if they needed an extra maid at the ball. When the Duke asked the reason for this, she mentioned that she would like to meet Prince Edward at least once. But Daisy thought it was useless and left for her room. Later that night, the Duke informed Hattie that he would be writing his reply. He wrote something on a piece of paper and asked Hattie to leave. As the Duke asked Hattie to leave the room, Hattie noticed that the Duke was colder than usual. Suddenly, he saw Pirta running towards him. He told her that she shouldn't be out here by herself so late at night. Pirta asked if the Duke was leaving. Hattie began to say that he was, but Pirta interrupted, asking if he was going with Daisy. Hattie asked Pirta to keep her voice down, wondering if she was very curious to have come running out like this. Hattie informed Pirta that the Duke did seem earnest but didn't think the Duke would be so cautious about revealing his feelings. Pirta held Hattie's hand and told him not to worry as she was there. Hattie and Pirta were not the only ones curious about the Duke's reply. The next morning, Hattie informed Daisy and Pirta that the Duke had left for Utina early in the morning and would be back the next day. Daisy asked why he left so early, and Pirta complained that Hattie should have woken her up. Hattie told Pirta that the Duke had visited her room, but she was asleep. Daisy looked at Pirta and praised her for her good behavior, even when the Duke was not at home. Pirta told Daisy that she wasn't lonely because Daisy was there. Daisy was confused and asked what she meant. Pirta replied, "You would be lonely without Dad, right?" Hattie and the other workers were shocked and stared at Daisy. Daisy, feeling uncomfortable, asked Pirta why she would be lonely just because the Duke was not there. Suddenly, Hattie took Pirta away to another room, making an excuse. Daisy wondered why they were acting so suspiciously, and thought that since the Duke would be gone until the next day, it was a great opportunity to expose Pirta and Hattie. After a while, Hattie was entering Pirta's room, but Daisy was keeping an eye on them. Pirda opened the door and asked Hattie to come in as he was already late. Daisy, listening to their conversation, thought that Pirda and Hattie were plotting something. As she entered the room, she noticed that Pirda and Hattie were using a ladder. Hattie was helping Pirda get a book from a high shelf, out of her reach. Hattie explained to Daisy that Pirda had asked him to take down her drawing papers because Rhodazin was coming today. Pirda, very happy, told Daisy that she had written a letter to Rhodazin and received a reply. She needed the papers with Hattie's help so she could finish the drawing and gift it to Rhodazin. Daisy realized this was why Pirda had told Hattie she didn't have much time. Hattie informed Daisy that Pirda couldn't find her, so he had to get the paper himself. Daisy felt embarrassed and apologized to both of them. Pirda and Hattie looked at each other and exchanged a strange smile. After Daisy realized that she was doubting Pirda and Hattie for no reason, she stopped her investigation. Pirda was really excited to meet Rhodazin and called Daisy to come quickly. As Rhodazin arrived at the mansion, Pirda ran very quickly, jumped from the last 2 stairs, and hugged Rhodazin. Daisy was worried while watching this as Pirda could hurt herself. While Pirda and Rhodazin were greeting each other, Daisy thought that maybe in the future, Pirda might become a schemer. But right now she was just a kid, and whatever she plotted, it would be a cute, childish prank. Daisy was sure that Hattie was just playing along. Rhodazin and Pirda were sitting in Pirda's room, and Pirda was drawing something. When Rhodazin asked about the drawing, Pirda informed her that it was a picture of the two of them. Daisy was so happy watching them and informed them that she was going to get some snacks. Rhodazin looked at Daisy and asked Pirda if Daisy was going to be her mom. Pirda said yes, and Rhodazin asked when this would happen. Rhodazin started counting on her fingers and said probably after 30 nights. When Pirda asked Rhodazin if she also liked Daisy, she nodded and said yes. Rhodazin told Pirda that her own mom was also this nice. Pirda looked at Rhodazin and patted her shoulder. Rhodazin then added that if your mom is kind, it makes her happy too because they are best friends. After a while, Pirda decided to let Rhodazin touch her hair. Pirda told her that since she was in the inner circle now, the ritual was important. So, Pirda lay down on the ground and told Rhodazin to feel it. Rhodazin touched Pirda's hair and felt that it was really soft. They were both happy and enjoyed their time together. The next day, when the Duke arrived, Pirda came running towards him and hugged him. They both missed each other. Pirda informed the Duke that they had a guest over and that she managed everything. After a while, Daisy came running and asked Pirda not to run by herself. Suddenly, Daisy noticed the Duke. Daisy asked the Duke about his trip, and the Duke asked Daisy about the guest they had yesterday. Daisy suddenly noticed that the Duke was using the fountain pen she had given him as a present. Suddenly, Hattie came and gave a letter from the Imperial Palace to the Duke. Daisy thought it must be regarding the ball. As the letter arrived from the Imperial Palace, Pirda insisted that she wanted to read it. She started reading the letter but could not continue past the first line, which mentioned, "Thank you for your prompt reply. You are accompanying an esteemed guest." She asked her dad what an esteemed guest was. Hattie responded that it meant an honored guest who would be attending with him. After hearing this, Hattie and Pirda both turned around and started looking at Daisy. Daisy had an idea of what was happening. After a while, the Duke asked Pirda and Hattie to leave the room. He then called Daisy and told her that they would be going together as it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. Daisy asked if he was talking about the Imperial Ball. Duke nodded. Daisy then said she was just a commoner with no social standing. But the Duke informed her that he had already taken care of that. He told her that from now on, she was a member of the House of Heidi, a daughter of Viscount Heidi. This way, there would be no problem with her socializing with the other nobles at the ball. The Duke mentioned that it was kind of long and complicated, but he could explain it to her. He also added that he was worried it might make her feel uncomfortable. The Duke thought it would be better for Daisy to have a proper title than remain a commoner, and now, when they do things together, there would be fewer restrictions. After a few minutes, the Duke stood up and asked Daisy if she wanted to go to the ball with him. Daisy was wondering how she would handle being surrounded by so many nobles and what they might think about her involvement with the Duke. While she was pondering this, the Duke repeated himself and asked again, "Will you go to the ball with me?" Daisy held the Duke's hand, and the Duke mentioned that they should give the nobles something to think about. After this, the endless preparations for the ball began right away. As soon as the Duke made up his mind, various merchants visited the mansion daily, including the tailor. All these busy days flew by quickly, and before they knew it, the day of the ball was upon them. Pirda came running towards Daisy and asked if she had everything. She also asked if Daisy had put on her earrings and grabbed her gloves and everything else. Daisy confirmed to Pirda that she had taken everything and not to worry. Daisy asked if Pirda would be alright with Hattie when they were gone. Pirta told them that she had just turned 7, so she wouldn't cause trouble anymore. Hattie also guaranteed that Pirta was in safe hands and not to worry. Daisy thanked Hattie and was completely ready to go to the ball. Dizzy with excitement, she couldn't believe that she was going to the palace as the daughter of a viscount. She also knew that this would be a chance for her to see the suitor she created, and she couldn't lose this opportunity. Daisy asked the Duke if, since he had attended the ball many times, he had met Prince Edward. The Duke responded that he thought he had met him a few times, though Prince Edward was still young, so he hadn't seen him much. Daisy kept talking about the character she created and was really curious to meet him. She kept on talking about his characteristics, how good-natured he was, and the Duke just stared at Daisy. The Duke informed her that the characteristics she described matched Prince Glenn more than Prince Edward. Prince Glenn was the elder brother, 5 years older than Prince Edward. Daisy realized that she would have to wait a few more years to see the suitor she created, but was now excited to hear that there was another character who resembled him. After a while, the Duke and Daisy arrived at the Imperial Palace. The waiters greeted and welcomed the Duke. Daisy couldn't believe she was really in the Imperial Palace. The Duke noticed that Daisy was a bit anxious, so he placed his hand on hers and told her not to worry, assuring her that there was nothing to be concerned about and that they would have a good time for sure. Suddenly, people noticed the Duke and started greeting him. They also saw a new face with him. The Duke introduced Daisy as they had rehearsed, presenting her as Lady Heidi from the House of Heidi. People were confused by this name as they had never heard of it before, so the Duke informed them that they were an esteemed family from Utina. He also mentioned that the House of Henstone had a close relationship with them for a long time. When the Duke looked at Daisy, he had a smile on his face. Seeing his smile, Daisy was relieved, remembering what the Duke had said earlier, that there was nothing to worry about as he had handled the situation well. After a while, the music started playing, and people were dancing. The Duke extended his hand and asked Daisy if she would like to dance with him. People were staring at them both. Daisy took his hand but asked the Duke to forgive her if she stepped on his feet. She also informed him that this would be her first time dancing like this, as she had never danced like this, not even in her previous life. The Duke smiled, happy that it would be her first dance and that it was with him. They both started dancing, and the Duke's hand was on Daisy's waist. Daisy could feel his breath. People were looking at them and thinking how lovely they looked together. They were amazed as this was the first time the Duke was dancing with someone. After stumbling upon each other a few times, they finished the dance. Daisy got a chance to catch her breath, so she stepped outside of the palace. She felt a bit bad for leaving the Duke inside as girls surrounded him, but she thought that he must be used to it by now. Suddenly, she heard someone crying nearby. When she saw a little boy sitting outside, Daisy asked him if he was lost or needed help. When the boy turned around, she saw that he had brown hair and green eyes. Daisy was shocked and realized that this kid was Prince Edward, the second prince, and the character she had created. Prince Edward asked Daisy not to tell anyone that she had seen him there, promising that if she kept the secret, she would be graciously rewarded in the future. After a while, a man came looking for Edward, and Edward called him his brother. As Daisy turned around, she saw that it was the first prince. Daisy was shocked to see the first prince because he looked exactly like how she had pictured the second prince in her mind. The brown ponytail, handsome eyebrows, and those gentle eyes. She couldn't believe that she was seeing her ideal male character this soon. The first prince asked Daisy who she was, and she responded with her name. The first prince was very casual and informal, and he told Daisy that he wanted to meet her. Daisy was shocked as to why the first prince wanted to meet her. The first prince told Daisy that he should officially introduce himself too. He said that his full name was quite long, so she could call him Glenn. Glenn mentioned that he didn't like to be so formal. Daisy asked him how she could address the prince by his name, but Glenn changed the topic and asked Daisy if she would be dancing with the Duke again after the audience with His Majesty, as people would resume dancing. Glenn told Daisy that it was surprising enough that the Duke was there with someone and that he danced as well. It was big news, but he missed it. So he quickly made a request with the royal painter to paint them if Daisy and the Duke danced again later, so the image would be preserved for a long time. Glenn asked Daisy again if she would be dancing with the Duke. Daisy respectfully declined and said that it would be difficult. She also apologized to Glenn for going against his order, but Glenn was not so formal and started laughing, saying he didn't like to be so formal. Daisy noticed that he talked too much, and she couldn't let herself get stuck in this. She told him that she needed to get inside. As she was going, Glenn had one more thing to ask about the Duke, but suddenly the Duke appeared and told Glenn to ask the question directly to him. Glenn started laughing again, greeted the Duke, and also told him that he almost forgot what he looked like. The Duke also greeted him. The Duke told Glenn that he would come and say hello again later, but for now, he had to excuse them. But Glenn told them they had to answer his questions first. He mentioned that he had heard the Duke mobilized knights to arrest the Dark Guild of Pontypool, and that the Duke was there for the infiltration and rescued a beautiful woman. The Duke confirmed this, and Glenn asked if the beautiful lady was Daisy. The Duke told him that he would tell him more about it next time in detail, as it was not proper to have such a conversation while keeping a lady waiting. The Duke also told Glenn that considering the prestige of the royal family, shouldn't he refrain from speaking in such a manner. Glenn told him not to worry, as nobody paid attention to him anyway. The Duke reminded him that there were still many eyes watching. Suddenly, 2 waiters came and told Glenn that His Majesty was looking for him. Prince Edward was worried and told his brother that he didn't want to go. Glenn reassured his little brother that it wouldn't take long and would be over soon. Glenn turned around, said goodbye to the Duke and Daisy, and gave a wink to Daisy. The Duke asked Daisy to get inside, but Daisy responded with, "Yes, sir," which was problematic because she was not a commoner here. After a while, they went back to their palace. The Duke and Daisy reached their palace late at night and decided to be quiet as Pirta must be sleeping. However, they suddenly saw that Pirta and Hattie were awake but completely drained and exhausted. The Duke picked up Pirta and asked her why she hadn't gone to bed. Hattie informed him that she had been dozing on the couch for a while, waiting for them. The Duke took Pirta to her room and made her sleep. Daisy and the Duke also decided to go to bed, wished each other good night, and left for their respective rooms. As Daisy was heading towards her room, the Duke stood there staring at her. This was the first ball the Duke had been truly excited about, and the reason was that he was there with Daisy. It took him a long time to realize his feelings. Daisy had told him that she wanted to attend the ball, and he wanted her to be happy. So, he traveled all the way to Utina to make it happen. While traveling, he realized that he had feelings for Daisy and admitted to himself that he had completely fallen for her. The next morning, Daisy went to wake up Pirta and told her that it was time for breakfast. Daisy was wondering why the Duke was late, as they were usually the ones who were late. Suddenly, they noticed that the Duke had arrived, and everybody wished him good morning. Hattie started looking up at his schedule, thinking he might have to go somewhere because the Duke was well dressed, differently from usual. When the Duke saw Hattie, he informed him that he didn't have anything scheduled for today. Hattie was left wondering why he was so dressed up. The Duke mentioned that there was no particular rule stating that he could only dress like that when going out. The Duke was trying to figure out how to approach Daisy and casually ask her out on a date. He was tired because he had been up all night thinking about this dilemma. He realized that there were too many staff members in the mansion and that Pirta was always with Daisy, so going out would be the best plan. The Duke thought that if he could take Daisy somewhere she had been wanting to go, it would make it even better, but he worried he wouldn't get a moment to speak with her. When Pirta went with Hattie, the Duke seized the opportunity. He started the conversation by talking about Pontypool, mentioning that there were more beautiful places with stunning sunsets and old ruins. He tried to steer the conversation towards new places and adventures, but nothing seemed to help. Finally, he directly asked Daisy if there was anywhere she would like to go, offering to escort her. Daisy was sitting in her room, thinking about the time when the Duke asked her out on a date. He mentioned that he only wanted it to be the two of them. The next day, Daisy returned to the Duke with a bunch of papers, including a list of all the places she wanted to visit. The Duke wondered if she had stayed up all night to make this. He laughed and agreed to go everywhere on the list. Daisy was reflecting that in her previous life, she had many unfulfilled dreams. One of them was becoming a barista, but even in this life, she ended up in Daisy's shoes, struggling to make ends meet. Hobbies were a luxury she could not afford, but today she was watching an interesting way to brew coffee. The Duke and Daisy were at a coffee shop, and Daisy was explaining to the Duke a method through which you can increase the pressure sufficiently with hot water to filter the coffee. This cafe was the only one in the entire empire that had such equipment. Daisy was really happy to have a cup of coffee, and she also loved the whipped cream in it. It was perfect for her. She asked the Duke if he wanted to try it and mentioned that he could try it from the other side of the cup. The Duke grabbed the cup, wiped the whipped cream from Daisy's face, and started drinking from the same cup. Suddenly, Daisy was about to fall, but the Duke quickly grabbed her hand and told her that another fall was bound to happen, no matter what he said. Daisy wondered if she should be doing this with the main character's father, but soon she forgot about her worries. They started visiting the places on her list. They were on a bridge, and Daisy realized why everyone recommended it. It was beautiful. It was Daisy's first time visiting this place, even though it was a popular destination for many locals. Daisy was really happy when she saw a boat and asked the Duke if they could have a boat ride. The Duke didn't deny her request. Even though he suffered from motion sickness on boats, He was determined to give Daisy anything she wanted. While they were on the boat, the Duke's face turned blue. Daisy asked him to trade places, but he insisted he was fine and would continue. Daisy thought that she could see where Pietra got her stubbornness from. After a while, the Duke was sitting on a chair, still recovering from the boat ride. Daisy wondered if she shouldn't have asked the Duke for a boat ride. After a while, she came close to the Duke and shaded him from the sunlight. Daisy shielded the Duke from the sunlight. The Duke held Daisy's hand and asked her something he was curious about. Daisy noticed that the Duke looked a bit serious. The Duke remarked that as she wrote the novel, she poured her heart into the character with brown hair and green eyes, which seemed to be her preferred style. However, while the Duke was talking, he began thinking about the second prince feeling pressured to step up as the next crown prince, since the first prince was not quite right for the job. The Duke interrupted Daisy's thoughts and asked if his question was too difficult. Daisy, lost in her own world, had not been paying attention. The Duke asked again if she had any other styles she liked. Daisy was once again distracted and didn't understand what the Duke really meant. The Duke suggested that perhaps she might like someone more quiet, serious, and maybe even a little cold on the outside at first, someone who is not so good at expressing his feelings. Daisy then informed the Duke that the future Triumph was a type of guy she used to fangirl over. On a serious note, she said she prefers guys who are kind and warm, like the man in front of her. Both of them looked at each other and blushed deeply. Back at the mansion, Hattie was very anxious and worried about how the Duke was doing out with Daisy. He was pacing in circles, making Pietra dizzy. Rhodazin asked Hattie what he was so stressed about, and Pietra informed her that her dad and Daisy had gone out on an outing today, which made Hattie anxious. Hattie was concerned as Pietra told Rhodazin everything, but Pietra reassured Hattie not to worry since Rhodazin was their ally too. Pietra and Rhodazin hugged each other. Hattie watched them and thought about how happy they were together. After a while, Rhodazin asked Pietra if she was going to the festival tomorrow, where you make paper lanterns and send them up into the sky. Pietra told her she had been to it so many times that she didn't find it fun anymore. Hattie remembered that it was already that time of year, and realized he shouldn't be sitting around as he needed to make some arrangements. After a while, Daisy returned to the palace and Pietra ran to hug her. Hattie asked the Duke if he had a good time, and the Duke just nodded. Hattie thought to himself that the upcoming festival could be used to their advantage. He asked Daisy if she knew about the festival in downtown Pontypool that happens once a year. He also mentioned that it is a festival with a superb view of the lanterns adorning the sky. Daisy said she had heard of it and always wanted to go. The Duke asked if they should go together, and Daisy, excited, said yes. Pietra and Daisy were so happy and excited that they started dancing. Hattie was pleased that everything was going according to his plan. Hattie reached the shore of the sea and wondered what he should do. His first option was to put a bench at the center of the beach so they could enjoy the lanterns as they floated into the sky. His second option was to place a seat at the edge of the beach, but he was concerned that at the edge, they might miss the spectacular view of the countless stars twinkling by the cliff. He considered setting up both, but then the four of them would be separated. After some thought, he decided that Daisy and the Duke could sit separately together. So, he finally decided to prepare both places, allowing Daisy and the Duke to go to the one in the center. Hattie was pleasantly surprised by his own competence. On the day of the festival, when the Duke arrived, Daisy and Pietra went ahead. A worker informed the Duke that 2 locations had been prepared, one at the center and one at the edge of the beach. The Duke thought that Hattie must have made the arrangement for him and Daisy at the edge of the beach, so he went there and saw the place was well decorated. The Duke was excited and started waiting. After a while, Hattie came and asked the Duke why he was sitting there. The Duke explained that he had waited for Hattie at the crossroads for a long time, but Hattie never came. Hattie informed him that the arrangement was made for him at the center of the beach. He pulled the Duke and decided to show him the place, but by then, the beach was completely filled with people. Pietra and Daisy were enjoying the show from the middle of the beach. Hattie and the Duke were disappointed as their plan was ruined. The Duke and Hattie sat at the edge of the beach. The ladies started looking at the arrangements that were made and assumed there was some kind of romantic surprise event, but they noticed that both of them were male. Hattie asked the Duke if he should close the curtains as people were watching them. The Duke replied that it would make it even worse. Pietra and Daisy were really happy watching the show, and Daisy was the happiest since she had never seen this so close. Pietra gathered flowers and gave them to Daisy. They were both happy and hugged each other. When Daisy asked Pietra where Hattie and the Duke were, Pietra informed her not to worry as they had already seen this many times with her. Since it was Daisy's first time, she should enjoy it with Pietra. For Daisy, it was a beautiful night and she hoped it would never end. The next day, when they reached the mansion, There was a letter for both the Duke and Daisy. Daisy wondered who would send a letter to her and noticed that it was from Glenn, the first prince. Duke and Daisy received a letter from Glenn, the first prince. When Hattie asked about it, Daisy informed him that it was an invitation to a party hosted by Prince Glenn. It was a party with horseback riding. Daisy thought a party sounded nice, and she had always wanted to go horseback riding. She couldn't believe she might get to do both at once. It was really exciting for Daisy, and she couldn't wait. However, looking at the Duke, she noticed he was not at all excited. Daisy wondered if the Duke, having been invited to many of these parties, had gotten used to all of this by now. Suddenly, Daisy told the Duke not to worry about it and suggested they go together. The Duke changed his mind and thought that showing his face at an event like this wouldn't be a bad idea. Hattie asked Daisy if she knew how to ride a horse. Daisy didn't, but the Duke intervened in the conversation and said he would teach her. Several days later, on the day of the party, the Duke and Daisy arrived. Both of them were sitting on a horse. Daisy couldn't believe she was at a party hosted by the prince on the royal family's property, and she was really glad to be in her shoes. The Duke helped Daisy get down from the horse when suddenly Glenn came up to greet them both. He thanked them for coming. Daisy mentioned that it was an honor to be there. Glenn patted Daisy on the shoulder and told her there was no need for such formality with him. The Duke, feeling a bit jealous, got in the middle of them and thanked the prince again for having them. The prince told them that he was the one who was grateful, as since the Duke came, all the other guests were also excited. Everybody took a seat at the dining table. Glenn told Daisy that Edward remembered her by name, but Edward was upset that Daisy had called him a kid. Glenn also asked Daisy if she would come over when Edward was present. Glenn told Daisy that Edward might act prickly, but he was sure Edward would be happy to see her. Suddenly, the Duke asked the prince about his new residence currently being built in Villainess. He said it would be completed soon and he wanted to invite friends over. The Duke also mentioned that it would be nice if Glenn came with the second prince. The Duke told him that a change of scenery would do him good. Daisy wondered if Villainess was far from their place and the Duke's residence, and why he would want to go there. Suddenly, she remembered that the Duke was trying to keep Prince Edward away from Little Chestnut. Prince Glenn was really happy and told the Duke he couldn't refuse this invitation. Daisy thought that another meeting with the second prince would allow them to gather more clues about the future so they could be prepared. Daisy looked around and noticed that there were many young and good-looking men and women there. 2 women came and praised Daisy, saying they had heard she was in charge of the ladies' education. But Daisy thought to herself that the only thing she had taught Little Chestnut was how to fold a paper pumpkin. Daisy was feeling really hungry, but nobody was touching the food. The Duke noticed this, and he started taking some food, and Daisy was worried that everybody was staring. A hush fell over the crowd as the Duke lifted his fork to his lips. Anticipation hung heavy in the air, all eyes fixated on the man who held so much power. Glenn, ever the observant one, recognized the growing unease and took it upon himself to ease the tension. With a warm smile and a booming voice that carried across the gathering, he announced, "The Duke has graciously decided to inaugurate the feast. Let us all partake in the culinary delights prepared by the palace's talented patissier this very morning. I assure you, these cakes and sweets are unlike anything you've ever tasted before." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Food, after all, was a universal unifier, and the promise of fresh, delectable treats was enough to momentarily distract them from the Duke's stoic presence. A particularly enthusiastic guest, a portly gentleman with a handlebar mustache, leaned forward and called out, "Do tell, good sir, is the renowned lemon pie on the menu today?" Glenn chuckled heartily. "Why, my dear fellow," he boomed, "that was the very first item out of the oven this morning. The kitchens were abuzz with activity at dawn, and I can assure you, the aroma alone was enough to set one's mouth watering." With that, the dam broke. Conversations erupted as people eagerly dug into the spread before them. The clatter of cutlery mingled with satisfied sighs and appreciative murmurs. The tension that had initially gripped the atmosphere melted away, replaced by the simple pleasure of enjoying a delicious meal in good company. Daisy, initially hesitant, eventually succumbed to the tempting aromas and joined the revelry. After a delightful repast, the urge for some postprandial activity stirred. The idea of a leisurely horse ride by the ocean was unanimously agreed upon. As they mounted their steeds, a cool breeze carrying the salty tang of the sea whipped at their faces, a refreshing contrast to the warmth of the afternoon sun. Daisy, accustomed to the open fields surrounding her home, found a new thrill in riding along the shoreline. The rhythmic crash of the waves against the shore provided a natural soundtrack to their journey, and she realized with a touch of surprise that she was quite the adept rider. The Duke, ever watchful, noticed a particularly strong wave approaching and leaned towards Daisy. "The waves are getting a bit rough here," he cautioned gently. Be careful, Daisy. Daisy flashed him a reassuring smile. No need to worry, Your Grace, she replied confidently. I have a very good teacher, after all. Suddenly, a new rider emerged from a nearby path. A beautiful woman, her fiery red hair cascading down her back, rode a magnificent black stallion towards the Duke. Her eyes widened in surprise as she saw him. Well, Duke, she drawled, her voice dripping with amusement. What a delightful surprise to see you in such an informal setting. I must confess, I've only ever encountered you at the most prestigious balls. The air crackled with a subtle tension. It was clear the woman was attempting to flirt with the Duke, her words laced with a suggestive undercurrent. The Duke, however, remained unfazed. Indeed, he replied politely, his voice betraying no emotion. However, I must point out the danger of our horses being in such close proximity. Perhaps you could. He trailed off, gesturing for her to move away slightly. The woman's cheeks flushed a rosy pink. She stammered a brief apology and nudged her horse back onto the path, clearly flustered by the Duke's rebuff. Just then, Glenn rode up beside Daisy, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Splendid horsemanship, Daisy, he declared, his voice laced with a hint of admiration. He leaned closer, his gaze lingering on her face for a beat too long. There's something truly special about you, Daisy, he began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Before Daisy could pry further into his cryptic remark, her horse whinnied sharply and bolted forward. Startled, Daisy lost her grip on the reins and tumbled headfirst into the cool embrace of the ocean. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers as they witnessed the unexpected plunge. Daisy surfaced, sputtering and disoriented, mortified by the sudden turn of events. The weight of countless eyes staring down at her only amplified her humiliation. She sank back under the water, wishing for the earth to swallow her whole. Suddenly, a loud splash echoed beside her. She flinched, bracing herself for another unwanted encounter, only to find Glenn beside her, his hair plastered to his forehead and a wide grin splitting his face. Refreshing, isn't it? As the people saw their first prince on the ground, they all started rushing towards him. Daisy thought it was her chance to get up. Suddenly, the Duke approached and gave Daisy a towel. He picked her up and asked Glenn if he was all right. The Duke then carried Daisy away in his arms while people stared at them. Glenn watched the Duke and Daisy very closely from a distance. It was time for every guest to leave. Everyone was saying goodbye to the first prince. The Duke and Daisy also came to bid farewell to the prince. Daisy thanked the first prince for having them and mentioned that she had a really good time. Glenn told Daisy that he was the one who was grateful for her being there. In her mind, Daisy was wondering all she did was make a fool of herself by falling into the water. Glenn was about to say something to Daisy, but the Duke interrupted, thanked the prince for inviting them, and said they should be going. As they left, Daisy turned to Glenn and mentioned the earlier incident when he saved her. She apologized and thanked him. Glenn acted as if he didn't know what she was talking about. Daisy informed him that she knew he fell into the water on purpose. Glenn smiled and said he wouldn't do that, insisting it was a pure accident. Daisy smiled, thinking that Prince Glenn was a terrible liar. The prince told Daisy that it was chivalry. He was being chivalrous. After the Duke and Daisy reached their palace, they rushed to Pirta's room and saw that Pirta was crying loudly, saying that something fell off. Daisy was worried and asked if she had fallen while sleeping, but Pirta showed Daisy the hairband Daisy had gifted her. It was broken, and one of the pumpkins had fallen off the hairband. The Duke and Daisy were relieved that it was nothing serious. Pirta informed Daisy that she wore it last night before sleeping, and when she woke up, she found it broken with one of the pumpkins fallen off the band. The Duke informed Pirta to take care of the things she cared about, and Pirta started crying loudly again. Daisy told Pirta not to worry as she could fix it. She promised to go back to the store and ask them to repair it. Pirta hugged Daisy and told her that she was the best. Later, when Daisy went to the store, she requested the store woman to repair it. The woman informed her that it would take about 3 to 4 days, and Daisy was fine with that. Daisy asked the store woman to fix it so that it never falls off again. The store woman assured Daisy that they would let her know once it was done. As Daisy came out of the store, she wondered what else she could do to cheer up Pirta. She thought of bringing her some pumpkin cookies to make her feel better. Suddenly, Glenn appeared from behind and scared Daisy. She turned around, shocked to see him there in very informal attire. Glenn told Daisy that it was nice seeing her in such a different setting. Daisy was addressing him as the prince, but he asked her not to do so, explaining that if the nobles who knew him saw him here, it would be a big headache for him. Daisy was shocked, never imagining that she would run into the first prince in the market. Glenn asked Daisy where she was headed. She informed him that she was in the market running some errands. Glenn, without wasting time, told Daisy that it was such a happy coincidence that they met and asked her to have lunch together. But Daisy wondered if he was asking her to go to the palace. However, Glenn quickly clarified that he had barely escaped that place and had no intention of returning anytime soon. Despite his invitation, Daisy hesitated about the lunch, unsure of what to expect. Sensing her reluctance, Glenn began to act disappointed, expressing that he might have to eat alone. He earnestly requested her company, and after some persuasion, Daisy finally agreed to join him. Daisy was anxious about finding a place that would satisfy the refined tastes of a prince. She wondered where she could take him that would meet his standards. But it seemed like Glenn had come prepared. He confidently told Daisy that he knew an excellent place and urged her to come with him. Daisy couldn't help but wonder if Glenn often escaped from the palace, as he seemed quite familiar with the city streets and knew his way around very well. They soon arrived at their destination, Chez News, the restaurant where Daisy used to work. The moment Daisy recognized the place, panic set in. She feared running into someone she knew, which could lead to the prince being identified. She quickly grabbed Glenn's hand and started running away from the restaurant. When Glenn questioned her sudden urgency, Daisy explained that she knew a better place and promised to take him there. After a while, they found themselves sitting in a different restaurant. Glenn, looking around, commented that it might not be suitable for nobles, considering its modest ambience. Daisy, however, reassured him, explaining that her hobby was discovering hidden culinary gems and must eat places around the city. Their conversation soon turned to what makes a good restaurant. They discussed how both the ambience and the quality of the food are crucial. Deciding to order, Glenn glanced at the menu and noticed that the special of the day was beef. He asked Daisy if she was craving beef, but Daisy advised against it. She explained that sometimes restaurants put items on the special or recommended section to use up remaining ingredients. Glenn was amazed by Daisy's insights and asked how she knew so much about the restaurant business. She modestly replied that she knew her way around restaurants quite well. Daisy then recommended trying the pork dishes, which the restaurant was known for. They ordered the pork, and as they started eating, they found the food to be exceptionally delicious. Both of them thoroughly enjoyed their meal. During their conversation, Glenn shared that when he ventures out into the city, he goes by the name Len. He explained that he chose this name because both Glenn and Len end with N, making it an easy alias for him to remember. As they laughed and enjoyed each other's company, Glenn's expression suddenly turned serious. He asked Daisy if he could inquire about something personal. Daisy, intrigued but not alarmed, told him to go ahead. Glenn then asked if she had a close relationship with the Duke. Daisy was taken aback by the question, shocked and unsure of how to respond. Daisy was utterly shocked by the prince's question regarding her close relationship with the Duke. Glenn elaborated that he had observed the two of them often seen together at various social events and gatherings. He admitted that he had no idea they lived under the same roof until he discovered it yesterday during tea. Daisy, trying to maintain her composure, informed him that she was in charge of educating the Duke's daughter, and teaching her etiquette and manners was most effective if she was by her side all the time. Glenn then asked Daisy if this meant they just had a professional relationship with the Duke. Daisy began to wonder, reflecting on the fact that they had gone on a date not too long ago. Her heart pounded and she blushed every time she saw the Duke, but there was nothing officially between them. She chose not to say a word to Glenn about these thoughts. Glenn, noticing her discomfort, apologized if his question was too difficult. After a while, Daisy returned to the palace. As soon as Pirta saw her coming, she rushed towards Daisy with great enthusiasm and asked if her headband could be fixed, and if they could restore it exactly to how it was before. Daisy gave Pirta a reassuring pat on the head and told her not to worry, assuring her that they could indeed fix it. Pirta was visibly relieved. Holding Daisy's hand, Pirta eagerly told her to come with her as she wanted to show her something special. She led Daisy to her room where the Duke and Hattie were sitting. They were in the middle of making a house out of chocolate. The Duke and Hattie greeted Daisy warmly. The only thing left to complete the chocolate house was to attach the chocolate door. Hattie asked Daisy why she was so late, mentioning that Pirta had been upset because of her delay. To cheer her up, the Duke and Hattie had put in a lot of effort. Daisy approached Pirta and apologized for being late, explaining that she had run into someone while she was downtown. The Duke, curious, asked who she had run into. Daisy responded that she had happened to meet Prince Glenn in the city. The Duke's reaction was immediate and intense. He was angry upon hearing this and broke the chocolate door he had in his hand. Everybody in the room was stunned by his reaction. Pirta started crying as the door was broken, and it was the last piece needed to complete the house. She cried loudly, her distress echoing through the room, but the Duke left the room abruptly. Hattie, who had been with the Duke for a long time, had never expected to see him so deeply affected by what seemed to be unrequited love. Hattie approached the Duke and remarked on how remarkable the first prince was. He commented that sneaking out of the palace to enjoy the city must be the prince's favorite hobby. Hattie noticed that the Duke was quite annoyed by the prince, and he found the situation somewhat amusing. Hattie further added that Daisy must also be amazed by the prince's amiability. The Duke, who was writing something on a piece of paper, froze. Hattie was intentionally saying all these things to provoke jealousy in the Duke. He began to elaborate, telling the Duke that it sounded like Daisy, and the prince had a long and pleasant conversation, and she must have laughed so much that her stomach hurt. He also mentioned that he had never seen Miss Daisy so animated and full of life. The Duke, feeling a cold shiver, asked Hattie if he was being too cold towards others. Hattie replied that the Duke was more guarded than cold, which was an issue. He explained to the Duke that if he liked something, he should express it. If he was happy, he should show it. If he found something lovely, he should let it be known. And if he disliked something, he shouldn't be afraid to express it. Only then would the other person understand his true feelings. Hattie wanted to instill these thoughts in the Duke's mind to encourage him to confess his love to Daisy. The Duke, struggling with his emotions, asked if he really had to express all those feelings. Hattie, emphasizing their long friendship, informed the Duke that he felt compelled to say these things. He warned that if this continued, Daisy might choose Prince Glen over him, and he would be powerless to do anything about it afterwards. The Duke was deeply terrified upon hearing this, realizing the gravity of the situation. Later that night, a letter with a red seal arrived at the Duke's residence. The red seal indicated that the letter contained an urgent message. The next day at dawn, the Duke was getting ready and was thinking about all the things Hattie and he discussed the previous night. Hattie had mentioned that Prince Glen had a very vibrant personality, was genuine, and was not afraid to just be himself. That was his charm. He was very good at expressing himself. Hattie cautioned the Duke that he might not be in the running anymore if he left for Burness without expressing his feelings. As the Duke was leaving, he asked Daisy to stay safe. Daisy reassured him that Pirta wouldn't be meeting the second prince until much later in the future, but she was sure the situation still worried the Duke. She also told him she would come up with a plan, whatever it took. However, the Duke was thinking about something else. He was reflecting on Hattie's advice: if you express your feelings, only then will the other person know. So, the Duke moved forward, leaned towards Daisy, hugged her tightly, and gave her a kiss on the cheek. He told her he would be back soon. Daisy nodded. The Duke also mentioned that he would miss her. Later that day, whatever Daisy was doing and wherever she was sitting, she was lost in her thoughts. One particular line kept revolving in her mind, the Duke telling her that he was going to miss her. Trying to change her mood, Daisy patted Pirta's head. Pirta told Daisy that whenever she did that, it reminded her of her dad. Daisy was struggling to get him out of her head, but Pirta continued talking about her father. Suddenly, Hattie arrived and told Daisy that there was a letter for her. Pirta wondered if it could be from her dad, but it was from Prince Glen. Hattie was curious about what the prince had written. Daisy informed him that the prince said he wanted to pay them a visit. The next day, Hattie was explaining to Daisy that he could understand the prince wishing to stop by when the royal carriage was in the area, but he questioned why it had to be when the Duke wasn't home. Hattie mumbled to himself that they couldn't refuse the prince, so he turned to Daisy and told her that since the prince would be stopping by on business, he likely wouldn't stay long. Hattie suggested they should keep the visit short to not inconvenience the prince, offering him just one cup of tea. Hattie was determined, as he wanted Daisy to spend as little time with the prince as possible while the Duke was not in the city. The prince arrived, stepping down from his carriage. Daisy welcomed him. The prince asked if he was being an inconvenience by visiting on such short notice. Glen was being very formal, and Daisy found it surprising since he didn't use such language at the palace. After a while, the prince started laughing and told Daisy, "I got you." He was pranking Daisy and asked if she was surprised by his sudden formality. The people around were shocked, but suddenly a box opened, and the second prince emerged from it. Everybody freaked out. It was Edward, the future suitor. He met Glen. Daisy was distressed, thinking this couldn't happen. The little chestnut was inside the palace, and they couldn't let the second prince, Edward, meet Pirta. As Prince Glen and Daisy navigate their unexpected encounter and the arrival of Prince Edward, tensions rise within the palace walls. With emotions running high and secrets unfolding, will Daisy's carefully laid plans withstand the arrival of this new suitor? How will the Duke react upon his return? And what lies ahead for Daisy as she faces these new challenges? The next chapter promises to unravel these mysteries and more, leaving readers eagerly anticipating the twists and turns that lie ahead. Let's see that in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.